Chapter 339. Deities' lakes floated in Nye Li's myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting. Every low-grade deity's lake could produce close to 10,000 spiritual stones per month. As for the only mid-grade deity's lake, its output was even more shocking. It could produce 150 to 60,000 spiritual stones per month, as well as hundreds of spiritual stone essences. As long as Nye Li took out a small fraction, it would be enough to supply Gu Bei's 3,000 subordinates. Therefore, Nye Li had instructed Gu Bei to recruit as many subordinates as possible. After all, he could afford it. Although Gu Bei's 3,000 subordinates weren't particularly strong, with Nye Li's large supply of spiritual stones, their cultivation speed was naturally much faster than that of ordinary Hagami Nyunmyun disciples. For others, it was a little too frightening that Gu Bei's forces had expanded to such a degree in just a month's time. In a courtyard within the Sky Soul Institute, several people were gathered together. Among them were Gu Heng, Morong Yu, and a few others, as well as the bosses of several dozen forces. Gu Heng swept his gaze across the crowd and said, "I'm sure you all know why I've gathered all of you here. That brat Gu Bei's Demon League has already recruited 3,000 people in such a short amount of time. If we don't suppress the Demon League's growth, then we won't have any say in the Sky Soul Institute anymore. Boss Gu Heng, we've calculated it. Right now, that brat Gu Bei has to spend over 100,000 spiritual stones per month. It'll probably be hard for him to expand. If he keeps expanding, how many spiritual stones would he have to spend every month? It won't be long before he disbands, right?" "I think so too. 100,000 spiritual stones per month isn't a small amount. How could that brat Gu Bei afford it?" These forces all felt that if Gu Bei played like that, it would only be a matter of time before the Demon League disbanded. At that time, they wouldn't even have to do anything. Gu Heng coldly swept his gaze across the crowd and said in a low voice, "If you think that way, then you're gravely mistaken. I heard that not only did the Demon League not stop recruiting, they're even expanding. As long as they're 2 fate or above, they'll accept them." "How is this possible?" The bosses frowned. "I've looked into it, and it's true," Morong Yu said solemnly. "I don't know where they got so many spiritual stones from. For now, their spirit stones showed no signs of drying up. That kid, Gu Bei, had spent nearly 400,000 spiritual stones in a single auction. I reckon that they might have gotten their hands on the treasures of the ancient Almighty. That's why they're so extravagant." "The treasures of the ancient Almighty?" At Morong Yu's words, the eyes of the leaders of the various forces lit up. However, it was a pity that even if Gu Bei and the others managed to obtain the treasures of the ancient Almighty, they would not be able to do so. He would never bring it to the outside world. It was almost impossible for them to snatch it. Morong Yu swept a glance at everyone's expressions as a smile flitted across the corner of his mouth. What if they really have an endless supply of spiritual stones? Such a high treatment from the Demon Alliance will definitely cause your subordinates to become restless. At that time, will they still be willing to work for you like before? Can you be like the Demon Alliance and offer such high conditions? Morong Yu's right. The Demon League is breaking the rules. If they're allowed to continue like this, they'll definitely be punished. If we let them continue, Gu Bei's innate talent is extraordinary. If she becomes the patriarch of the Gu family in the future, we'll all be finished." Gu Heng said solemnly as he looked at everyone. A trace of ferocity flashed across his eyes. "Some of my ideas have gained the support of a certain person. The Demon Alliance won't be able to go far. However, I still need everyone's help. Please speak, Boss Gu Heng." The leaders of the various forces cupped their hands in greeting, although they didn't know who Gu Heng was talking about. For Gu Heng to hold him in such high esteem, that person shouldn't be simple. "If we all join forces, we can mobilize close to 16,000 people. We can definitely crush the Demon Alliance. Let's take advantage of the fact that the Demon Alliance hasn't developed to the point where they can threaten us. We'll strangle them in the cradle." A sinister expression flashed across Gu Heng's face. Hesitation appeared on the faces of the various forces' leaders. "Boss Gu Heng, Gu Bei is currently the first-in-line successor of the Gu clan. We can understand your feelings, but we're different from you. But we are different from you. We don't dare to offend the heir of the Gu family for no reason. These people could establish their own forces in the outside world. They were all shrewd people. Gu Heng wanted to borrow their strength to deal with Gu Bei. Naturally, it was to fight for the position of patriarch of the Gu clan. Now that Gu Heng was showing signs of falling out of favor in the Gu clan, they didn't want to be dragged into this whirlpool." A cold light flashed through Gu Heng's eyes. He understood that these people wouldn't get up without benefits. He said in a deep voice, "This matter isn't related to my own benefits. If the Demon Alliance continues to develop, none of you will have a good life. Everyone here today is on my side. As long as you're willing to help me eliminate the threat of the Demon Alliance, I can make a copy of the truth formula and give it to you." Hearing Gu Heng's words, the leaders of these forces were suddenly shocked. "Is what Boss Gu Heng said true?" "That's right." Gu Heng nodded and said, "Once a word is said, it can't be taken back." "All right, I'll do it. I'll do it too." The leaders of these forces responded one after another. The truth formula was a secret of the Gu clan. It was said that only the most talented geniuses of the younger generation could learn it. This was a secret that couldn't be passed down. Once it was passed down, the Gu clan would clean up the clan. They didn't expect that Gu Heng was actually willing to use the truth formula as the price. Glancing at these people, a cold light flashed through Gu Heng's eyes. In order to mobilize these people to help him, he had given them enough bait. As for the truth formula, what a joke. How could he, Gu Heng, teach it to outsiders? If he gave them a fake, they wouldn't be able to tell. In any case, they hadn't seen the real truth formula before. It was impossible for Gu Heng to take out real money. This bait would allow him to achieve his goal without paying any price. Someone suggested, "Boss Gu Heng, why don't you write a contract? That way we can trust you more." "I can write a contract, but I'll use an inscription pattern array to seal it. When the time comes, you can take the sealed contract and we'll unseal it together," Gu Heng said after pondering for a moment. Naturally, he had his own plans. "All right." The leaders of these forces exchanged glances and nodded in agreement. As long as they had something on Gu Heng, they didn't need to worry. In fact, they also understood that the Demon League was indeed a huge threat. Otherwise, they wouldn't have come here to discuss countermeasures with Gu Heng, Morongyu, and the others. The only reason they'd pretended to be indifferent was because they wanted Gu Heng to spit out some benefits. As for Gu Heng acting shamelessly, it wasn't as if they didn't have the means to keep him in check. If Gu Heng were to burn the bridge after crossing the river, then with so many of them, Gu Heng wouldn't be able to sit firmly on his position as the successor of the Gu clan. However, as far as Gu Heng was concerned, he'd deal with it when the time came. Right now, he had to get rid of Gu Bei first. He didn't care about anything else. Soon, Gu Heng began to mobilize the experts of the various forces in preparation to take action against the Demon League. 15,000 to 16,000 experts were more than enough to make it impossible for the Demon League to survive in the outside world near the Sky Soul Institute. Groups of experts left the Sky Soul Institute and headed for the outside world. On top of a floating deity's lake, this deity's lake was also close to drying up. However, there wasn't enough time for Nieli to collect the deity root. Therefore, it became a temporary base for Gu Bei and the others. Over 1,000 members of the Demon League were stationed here, while the others had headed for the outside world to hunt for demon beasts. Gu Bei, Lu Piao, and the others were currently training the newcomers. Without rules, nothing could be accomplished. Only with strict discipline could one have combat strength. In terms of how to handle a situation, Li Xingyun had taught them a lot. Right at this moment, Han Yen flew over. His body was still covered in wounds, as if he had just experienced a bitter battle. Belle, we were ambushed. Over 100 people died. Heng Yen gasped for air. His face was filled with pain, and his chest was still dripping with blood. This is a healing elixir. Hurry up and eat it. Gu Bei threw an elixir to Heng Yen and asked, "Tell me clearly what happened." Heng Yen swallowed the elixir and panted. "We were ambushed by a group of experts. They were all Heavenly Star Realm experts. We couldn't beat them, so I was the only one who managed to escape." A group of Heavenly Star Realm experts? Gu Bei furrowed her brows for a moment. The only ones who had a grudge with them were Gu Heng, Morongyu, and the others. The one with the greatest motive to suppress the Demon League was none other than Gu Heng. Gu Heng finally couldn't hold it in any longer. "Send someone to gather the remaining people. We'll retreat to the Sky Soul Institute first," Gu Bei said after some thought. With their current strength, it would be too difficult for them to contend against Gu Heng. Just as Gu Bei was about to lead his men away, a dense cluster of black dots appeared in the distant sky. Waves of powerful auras surged towards them. Over 10,000 people had surrounded the Demon League, and the one leading them was Gu Heng. "Cousin Gu Bei, long time no see," Gu Heng said to Gu Bei when he was only 100 meters away from Gu Bei. Gu Bei calmly looked at Gu Heng and said, "Cousin Gu Heng, how have you been? You didn't bring so many people to see me just to greet me, right?" "I've come to discuss something with Cousin Gu Bei." Gu Heng's eyes carried a trace of cold arrogance as he looked at Gu Bei. "What is it? I'd like to hear the details." Gu Bei swept a glance at the surroundings. Gu Heng had brought too many people with him. It wouldn't be easy for them to leave. Perhaps no one from the Demon League would be able to leave today. If Cousin Gu Bei is willing to withdraw from the Patriarch position and disband the Demon League, I can let bygones be bygones and control the Gu clan with Cousin Gu Bei in the future. How about it? Gu Heng narrowed his eyes as he looked at Gu Bei. Chapter 340. Take control of the Gu clan together? Gu Bei sneered in her heart. With Gu Heng's character, it would be strange if he was willing to take control of the Gu clan together with others. Gu Heng was the kind of person who couldn't tolerate any sand in his eyes. He had always regarded Gu Bei and Gulan as thorns in his flesh. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gathered so many people to destroy the Demon League. I think that disbanding the Demon League is still feasible. I'll go back and think about it for a few days. 3 days later, I'll give Cousin Gu Heng a reply. How about it? Gu Bei looked at Gu Heng and said with a smile. Gu Bei wasn't stupid. Since you want to play around, then I'll play with you. Gu Heng's eyes revealed a frightening cold light. 3 days later, he had gathered so many people to surround the Demon League. Was he going to go back and wait for another 3 days? Was this a joke? Cousin Gu Bei could have chosen any name, but you chose the name of the Demon League. It's really easy to associate it with the Yao Shun sect. Gu Heng said with a smile. With a wave of his hand, the experts under him slowly surrounded Gu Bei, Lu Piao, and the others. In any case, Gu Heng wanted to destroy the Demon League. If the Demon League wasn't willing to disband, then he would besiege the Demon League until it disbanded. As long as the people of the Demon League entered the outside world, there was only one word for them: death. Cousin Gu Heng must be joking. It's just a random name. How could it have anything to do with the Yao Shin sect? Gu Bei said perfunctorily. She looked at Lu Piao and prepared to lead the Demon League to find a place to break out of the encirclement. In order to prevent Cousin Gu Bei from walking on the evil path, as your cousin, I will naturally take on the responsibility and properly teach you all a lesson. Gu Heng sneered and said, with a wave of his hand, his subordinates charged towards the Demon League. Gu Heng had tens of thousands of subordinates, while the Demon Alliance only had 1,000. Moreover, the strength of Gu Heng's subordinates was clearly much stronger than the Demon Alliance. Kill! In an instant, an intense battle broke out. This was a one-sided encirclement. The members of the Demon League were killed one by one. The disparity in strength was just too great. Bell, Master Lu, will protect you as you leave. Hien snorted coldly. A group of Heavenly Star Realm cultivators brought Gu Bei and Lu Piao out. Gu Heng's palm energy surged. Bang, bang, bang. 5 Heavenly Fate Realm experts from the Demon League were killed one after another. Trying to escape? It won't be that easy. Gu Heng snorted and turned into a streak of light as he chased after Gu Bei. Gu Heng was a Heavenly Star Realm expert, and he had reached the peak of the Heavenly Star Realm. Furthermore, he'd already reached the pinnacle of the Heavenly Star Realm. He was much stronger than anyone in the Demon League. When he attacked, the surrounding heavenly energy gathered together and turned into a huge palm that slammed towards Gu Bei. Within that huge palm, silver lightning rained down like a torrential downpour. Boom, boom, boom. 2 Heavenly Star Realm experts of the Demon League were instantly annihilated. Watch out, Gu Bei! Lu Piao shouted anxiously. Gu Heng sneered. Gu Bei still wanted to escape from him? What a fool's dream. Gu Bei wasn't on the same level as him. The palm slammed down on Gu Bei, and countless silver lightning bolts enveloped Gu Bei. Gu Bei felt like his body was about to be crushed by the silver lightning and the huge palm. Am I going to be killed by Gu Heng? I can't accept this. Just as he was about to be killed by Gu Heng, the word Nia Li had written for Gu Bei suddenly flashed through his mind. Gu Bei's comprehension of sword intent. He was undoubtedly a peerless genius. Nia Li's word had given him endless inspiration. At that moment, Gu Bei seemed to have fallen into an extremely mysterious state. Boundless heavenly energy surged out of Gu Bei's body like a surging river. A vast starry sky appeared between heaven and earth. In the center of the starry sky, an ancient sword that was 3 feet long and emitted the aura of the sword ancestor suddenly appeared. It turned out that this was the infinite meaning contained in the word sword. Gu Bei's right hand condensed, and the ancient sword suddenly seemed to have a life of its own as it flew up like a spirit snake. It shot toward Gu Heng's palm. Boom! With a loud sound, the ancient sword pierced through Gu Heng's palm and shot toward Gu Heng's head. He felt an extremely sharp sword intent shooting toward him. The sword intent seemed to be able to pierce through everything. Seeing that the ancient sword was about to hit his head, Gu Heng hurriedly dodged. Swoosh! The ancient sword flew past Gu Heng's cheek and left a bloody mark on Gu Heng's face. Blood splattered. After the ancient sword brushed past Gu Heng's cheek, it instantly disappeared. Gu Bei spat out a mouthful of blood. Condensing this sword intent had exhausted all the heavenly energy in his body. Unfortunately, his comprehension of the sword intent was far from enough. Otherwise, he would have killed Gu Heng long ago. Although his heavenly energy was exhausted, there was an uncontrollable excitement and agitation on his face. This was the first time he had come into contact with the sword ancestor's intent. Even if he died, he would only drop 1 level of cultivation. However, comprehending the sword ancestor's intent gave him endless possibilities in the future. Ha ha ha, Gu Heng, you didn't expect this, did you? You wanted to suppress me, but you unexpectedly let me comprehend the sword ancestor's intent. As long as I have the sword ancestor's intent, even if my cultivation forever stops at the heavenly fate realm, my strength will surpass yours one day. Can you suppress me? Gu Bei arrogantly stared at Gu Heng. So what if he died here today? Gu Heng recovered from the shock of that terrifying sword intent, but he still had a lingering fear in his heart. He'd almost been pierced through by Gu Bei's sword intent. He never thought that the heavenly fate realm Gu Bei, who was like an ant in front of him, would actually almost kill him. His eyes revealed a deep unwillingness. Sword ancestor's intent. Why was Gu Bei able to comprehend the sword ancestor's intent? Why was Gu Bei the one who comprehended the sword ancestor's intent? That was a domain that only existed in the legends. Once Gu Bei continued to cultivate the sword ancestor's intent and reached a certain level. Even if Gu Bei's cultivation was only at the heavenly fate realm, she would still be able to defeat someone stronger than her. The sword ancestor's intent wasn't something that just anyone could cultivate. One had to be a genius who had a deep understanding of the sword Tao. Once the upper echelons of the Gu family knew that Gu Bei had condensed the sword ancestor's intent, there would be no place for him in the Gu clan. What sword ancestor's intent? It's just a child's trick. How dare you pretend to be the sword ancestor's intent? Ha ha ha, what a joke! Gu Heng would never admit that Gu Bei had successfully cultivated the sword ancestor's intent. You're still far from being able to compete with me. Bang! Bang! One by one, the experts of the Demon League were killed. Only 200 of the Demon League's 1,000 people were left. The remaining people wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. Let's see how much more heavenly energy you can condense. Gu Heng condensed a palm energy and grabbed at Gu Bei. Go to hell! Almost killed by Gu Bei's sword ancestor's intent, Gu Heng obviously had scruples when he made his move. He carefully guarded against it. A powerful palm energy blasted at Gu Bei through the air. Seeing that the palm energy was about to land on Gu Bei could no longer resist and could only smile bitterly. All of a sudden, a blast of qi came crashing down. With a bang, Gu Heng's palm energy was shattered and Gu Heng was forced to retreat. Gu Heng suddenly frowned and looked forward. He saw a young man in white standing proudly in the void. It's you! Gu Heng's pupils contracted slightly. The young man in front of him was Li Xingyun. He saw Li Xingyun standing in the void with his hands clasped behind his back. His white clothes were fluttering in the wind. He was handsome and just standing there casually, but he gave off a feeling of a deep abyss. In the distant sky, figures flew over like meteors. There were at least 2,000 or 3,000 people. All of Li Xingyun's Tianqing League members had come. Chapter 341. Li Xingyun, you want to stand up for the Demon League? Gu Heng stared coldly at Li Xingyun and said, although Gu Heng's strength was not as good as Li Xingyun's, the forces that Gu Heng mobilized were much stronger than Li Xingyun's Tianqing League. The Tianqing League only had a total of 2,000 to 3,000 people, but they had tens of thousands of people on their side. Gu Heng snorted and said murderously, if your Tianqing League insists on standing up for them, I don't mind destroying you too. Li Xingyun laughed and said, I, Li Xingyun, only have one creed, and that is loyalty. I, Li Xingyun, can go through water and tread on fire for my brothers. They're my brothers in the Demon League. Whoever goes against the Demon League will go against my Tianqing League. Gu Heng sneered and said, Li Xingyun, since you want to put the entire Tianqing League in, then don't blame me for being impolite. At this time, the bosses of dozens of forces under Gu Heng were full of doubts. They could deal with the Demon League, but they had no idea how to deal with the Tianqing League. What kind of person was Li Xingyun? Although the Tianqing League only had more than 3,000 people, Li Xingyun had too many brothers. Many of them were big shots. Once the war with the Tianqing League escalated, the scale of the war would reach an unknown extent. However, there was no turning back. Even if they had scruples, they had to take action. If they were scared off like this, it would be too embarrassing. Moreover, their brothers would also think that they were afraid of the Tianqing League. Since your Tianqing League is determined to stand up for the Demon League, then don't blame me, Gu Heng, for not giving you face Li Xingyun. A murderous glint flashed across Gu Heng's eyes. He shouted coldly, regardless of whether they are from the Demon League or the Tianqing League, kill them without mercy. Go. Gu Heng's men immediately launched a fierce attack on the members of the Tianqing League. A great battle broke out. 3,000 people against 10,000 people was still an absolute disadvantage. However, although the number of people in the Tianqing League was far from enough, they still had many Heavenly Axis and Heavenly Star Realm experts. Therefore, they weren't that easy to deal with. Both sides exchanged blows, and the place of contact was like a huge meat grinder. Experts fell one after another, and both sides suffered significant losses. Waves of palm energy and sword chi exploded in the sky. The battle became more and more intense, and both sides were in a killing frenzy. Li Xingyun took the lead. Charging at the very front, he killed over 10 experts of the same realm as him. The Heavenly Axis realm experts around him also did their best to protect Li Xingyun as they slaughtered their way through. Not far away, a group of Heavenly Axis realm and Heavenly Star realm experts escorted Gu Bei, Lu Piao, and the rest out of the encirclement. Although the players of the Tianqing League are very brave and fierce, however, they were still at a disadvantage in terms of numbers, and more people died. Boss Xingyun were not their match for now. A Heavenly Axis realm expert killed a Heavenly Star realm expert with a single punch, then turned to Li Xingyun. After encountering a fierce siege, everyone was under immense pressure. Brothers were constantly being killed around them. Of course, they also made the enemy pay a terrible price. Li Xingyun furrowed her brows for a brief moment. Indeed, Gu Heng had too many people with him. He gathered over 20 forces, and they'd come in a hurry. With just the strength of the Tianqing League, it was impossible for them to fight against Gu Heng's strength. Li Xingyun glanced at Gu Heng, who was overlooking the entire battlefield, and coldly snorted. Since Gu Heng wants to start a war, then we'll play with him to the end. Today, we'll escort our brothers from the Demon League, and we'll settle the score with him next time. Everyone follow me closely. Let's charge. Every time the Tianqing League participated in a war, Li Xingyun would bravely charge into the enemy lines. The moment they saw Li Xingyun break through the encirclement, everyone from the Tianqing League followed. Stop them, Gu Heng roared. Since Li Xingyun had come, how could she still want to leave? Thousands of people surrounded Li Xingyun's group, wanting to completely surround and kill Li Xingyun's group. Kill. Although the Tianqing League was at a disadvantage in terms of numbers, their morale was still high. Under the leadership of Li Xingyun, they tore through the encirclement and flew away with a group of people. Gu Heng's people chased after them and killed another 500 to 600 people. However, Li Xingyun's group still managed to escape. Seeing the Tianqing League and the Demon League's people leaving, Gu Heng was furious. However, although Li Xingyun's group had escaped, both the Tianqing League and the Demon League had suffered great losses. This was only the beginning. In the future, he would completely wipe out the Demon League and the Tianqing League in the outside world. Sky Soul Institute, Xiao Yu's courtyard. A group of people had gathered here. Nya Li had just finished his cultivation. Recently, due to the instability of his fate soul, he did not go to the outside world. It was only when Gu Bei, Lu Piao, and Li Xingyun returned that Nya Li knew that something had happened. How are your losses? Nya Li looked at Gu Bei and asked. Both the Demon League and the Tianqing League had suffered great losses. We have gathered the information. Everyone in the Demon League was ambushed. Out of the 3,000 people, only a few hundred are still alive. Lu Piao smiled bitterly. She glanced at Li Xingyun and said, the Tianqing League has also suffered great losses. At least 2,000 people died. Gu Bei said apologetically, actually, Brother Yin didn't have to come. You caused the Tianqing League to lose so many people. What are you talking about? In the outside world, as long as our brothers are in trouble, the Tianqing League will know about it. How can we shrink back? Although the Tianqing League has suffered some losses, Gu Heng's side has also suffered great losses. A rough estimate is that we have killed at least 2,000 people. Li Xingyun smiled proudly. Although Gu Heng's side had the advantage in numbers, the Tianqing League's combat strength was still quite good. Li Xingyun was very open-minded. After all, they had been in the outside world for a long time. They had experienced many similar battles. This was considered a relatively small one. Gu Heng's Blood Moon League has joined forces with dozens of forces to start a war with you. How are you going to deal with it? Li Xingyun looked at Nye Li and asked, "If you decide to start a war with them, I can contact some of my brothers to help you deal with the Blood Moon League. Gathering 8,000 to 9,000 people shouldn't be a problem." Gu Bei and Lu Piao also looked at Nye Li. They were waiting for Nye Li's decision. "I want to deal with Gu Heng's Blood Moon League. As for gathering other forces, there's no need. After all, it's not good to involve more people for no reason. However, I need Brother Xingyun's help. I wonder if Brother Xingyun is willing?" Nye Li thought for a while and looked at Li Xingyun. "There's no need to be willing, as long as Brother Nye Li says the word." Li Xingyun said proudly, "Are you sure you don't need to gather other forces?" "There's no need for that now." Nye Li smiled and said, "Do you have any ideas?" Li Xingyun looked at Nye Li and asked doubtfully. If it was just the Demon League and Tianqing League, they wouldn't have enough manpower. "Brother Xingyun, have you seen a fight between gangsters? A group of people ganging up on a single person. How should the weak person fight back?" Nye Li smiled and said, "Of course. They will grab the leader and beat him to death." Lu Piao said immediately. Then her eyes lit up. "That's right. Why do we need to deal with other forces? Anyway, we don't have any deep grudges with them. Why don't we just grab the Blood Moon League and beat them to death?" The corner of Li Xingyun's mouth curled up into a smile. This is indeed a good idea. If we can deal with the Blood Moon Union, the other forces will be afraid of us. Also, since Brother Nye Li can collect the deities' roots, we will deal with all the deities' lakes in the Blood Moon League. They won't even have a place to cry. Li Xingyun was also a smart person and immediately drew inferences. Collecting the deities' roots isn't enough. It's best if we can bribe their inner circle to keep an eye on Gu Heng. If there's a chance, we will kill Gu Heng. We will kill him until Gu Heng doesn't dare to go out." Gu Bei added. The four of them looked at each other and laughed sinisterly. "NN, I'm just chatting casually. In another month, Snail's baby will be born. Hee hee, although I still don't know if the little fellow is a boy or a girl. Snail is going to be a father soon." Chapter 342. After Li Xingyun, Gu Bei, and the rest made their preparations, they made their move. The life soul was an extremely mysterious thing. A fate soul that was placed in the soul hall was equivalent to a fake body. Once the external body died, the new body would be reconstructed according to the fate soul. However, the reconstructed body would only have 80 to 90% of the original strength, which was also the reason why one's cultivation would plummet. If they hadn't cultivated a fate soul, the human race would have long been extinct in the dangerous Draconic Ruins realm. With a fate soul, the human race was able to expand into the outside world. In order to compete for the resources of the outside world, spiritual stones, demon spirits, and even the ancient treasures hidden in the outside world, all sorts of conflicts would occur. Only by establishing a stable force in the outside world and dominating a region would one have the qualifications to become the patriarch of the Dragon Seal family, Gu family, Ashen Flames family, and other super families. This was also the reason why the heirs of the various families would compete with each other in the outside world. A weak patriarch wouldn't be acknowledged by the family. If the Demon League was destroyed by the Blood Moon League, not only would the family not help, they would even watch from the sidelines. If Gu Bei couldn't find her own way back, then this matter would become one of the criteria to determine if Gu Bei had the qualifications to become the patriarch. In a world where the strong preyed on the weak, only those who could survive were the strong. The Blood Moon League had gathered dozens of forces to suppress the Demon League and flaunt their strength. If the Demon League wanted to survive and gain a foothold in the outside world, then the only way was to give the Blood Moon League a heavy blow and prove their strength. Under the lead of Li Xingyun and Gu Bei, over 500 elites of the Demon League and Tianqing League set off. Their target was the deities' lake controlled by the Blood Moon League. As for Nye Li, he remained in the Sky Soul Institute and continued to concentrate on his cultivation. A brief moment later, another guest arrived. It was Venerable Red Soul. "May I ask why Venerable Red Soul is looking for me?" Nye respectfully asked. Hierarch Skycloud wishes to see you. Venerable Red Soul lightly smiled as he continued. Are you willing to make a trip with me? All right. Nye nodded. He already knew that in his previous life, what kind of person was Hierarch Skycloud? He had a good impression of Hierarch Skycloud. After all, Hierarch Skycloud was one of the more impartial people in the Hagami Union. Nye followed Venerable Red Soul along the winding path. Heavenly Cloud Palace. An old man with a solemn expression quietly floated in front of the temple, his clothes fluttering despite the lack of wind. Surges of majestic energy surged as the power of the heavenly star constantly transformed around his body. The aura of the entire Skycloud Shrine was under his control. This old man, this person was Venerable Red Soul's master, one of the 5 leaders of the Hagami Union, Hierarch Skycloud. Apart from Hierarch Skycloud, there were 5 other youths standing around him. Their auras were also powerful and pierced through the clouds. These 5 youths stood on either side of Hierarch Skycloud. They were most likely disciples of Hierarch Skycloud or someone else. Nye followed Venerable Red Soul into the Heavenly Cloud Shrine. When he looked ahead, he saw that Hierarch Skycloud was also looking in his direction. After seeing Hierarch Skycloud, Nye's heart trembled. Hierarch Skycloud's aura was a little different from the others. After thinking about it carefully, he realized that it was somewhat similar to Ing Yueru's. Could it be that Hierarch Skycloud had also learned the Heaven's divination technique? Nye only had this thought in his heart. He didn't dare to ask Hierarch Skycloud about it. After all, the Heaven's divination technique was extremely confidential. Hierarch Skycloud smiled slightly and said, You must be Nye? Yes, Hierarch Skycloud. Nye bowed slightly, appearing extremely respectful. After all, Hierarch Skycloud was one of the 5 leaders. The 5 disciples under Hierarch Skycloud all focused their gazes on Nye. They were obviously already acquainted with Nye. They all looked at Nye with different expressions. I've seen the words you wrote. The profoundness of your words even surprised me. With your current cultivation, it's truly amazing that you can write such profound words. I heard that you've already taken Ming from the tiny exquisite family as your master. Hierarch Skycloud looked at Nye and said amiably, Yes. Nye nodded his head, respectfully. He had indeed taken the master of the Nether Realm as his master. Naturally, what others didn't know was that he had another master in Yueru. Speaking of which, Ming and I also have some relationship. He's the disciple of an old friend of mine. I want to take you as my 39th disciple. I wonder if you're willing? As for Ming, I believe that he won't refuse. Hierarch Skycloud said with a kind smile on his face. Nye never imagined that Hierarch Skycloud would make such a request. It was too unexpected for Nye. Being able to take Hierarch Skycloud as his disciple would definitely be a great benefit for Nye. If he could obtain Hierarch Skycloud support, then he would be one step closer to becoming the Hagami Union Patriarch. Master, I'm afraid that this isn't appropriate. A golden-robed youth stood out and coldly swept a glance at Nye. Hierarch Skycloud frowned his brows and asked, What's inappropriate about it? The golden-robed youth said, trying to stop Hierarch Skycloud. Before we became Master's disciple, we were all well-known figures amongst our peers. Furthermore, our cultivations were at least at the Heavenly Axis realm. Nye is only at the Heavenly Fate realm. Furthermore, before Nye came here, he was Chi Mu's disciple. If you accept him as your disciple, wouldn't that mess up the seniority? The golden-robed youth said, trying to stop Hierarch Skycloud. Venerable Red Soul hastily cupped his hands and said, Lord Master, although Nye was my disciple in name, I don't have anything that I can teach him. He's basically been cultivating by himself. Venerable Red Soul bitterly smiled. Even so, the relationship between master and disciple cannot be erased, the golden-robed youth said without any hesitation. Hierarch Skycloud waved his hand and smiled. You don't have to care about such worldly views. As for cultivation, cultivation is secondary. In terms of Tao intent comprehension, I'm afraid that he's much stronger than many heavenly axis realm experts. At Hierarch Skycloud's words, the 5 disciples exchanged glances. It seemed that Hierarch Skycloud was determined to accept Nye Li as his disciple. The other didn't have much of an opinion, except for the golden-robed youth, who looked extremely unhappy. Venerable, who is he? Nye Li secretly transmitted his voice to Venerable Red Soul. Venerable Flameless is the eldest disciple of my master. He's in charge of the various matters of the Skycloud Hall. When Master is cultivating, he'll be the one managing the Skycloud Hall. It seems that he doesn't like you. Venerable Red Soul transmitted his voice to Nye Li and smiled helplessly. He was still very honest. Nye Li raised his head and cupped his hands. He said to Hierarch Skycloud, "Many thanks for Hierarch Skycloud's appreciation. I am very willing to become Hierarch Skycloud's disciple. However, I'm used to being free and undisciplined. I don't really know how to obey others. If I become Hierarch Skycloud's disciple, I hope to be able to come and go freely in the Skycloud Hall." Impudent, Venerable Flameless furiously glared at Nye Li and growled, "Master's willingness to accept you as his disciple is already a great gift to you. Instead of thanking him, you're actually talking about conditions?" At Venerable Flameless' words, Nye Li furrowed his brows. Nye Li didn't have the slightest favorable impression of Venerable Flameless. The reason why he made such a request was because he was afraid of being ostracized by Venerable Flameless in the Skycloud Hall. Although becoming Hierarch Skycloud's disciple was extremely beneficial to his future development, if he couldn't stay in the Skycloud Hall, then everything else would be for naught. If he couldn't come and go freely, Nye Li would rather not become Hierarch Skycloud's disciple. Chapter 343. Hierarch Skycloud had been paying attention to Nye Li's expression and was a little surprised. If it were any other disciple of the Sky Soul Institute, they'd definitely be ecstatic to be accepted as his disciple. However, Nye Li's expression remained calm. Hierarch Skycloud really admired Nye Li for being able to remain so calm at such a time. Indeed, his character was like his name. Nye Li's Tao intent cultivation had definitely reached a certain level of transcendence. Venerable Red Soul transmitted his voice to Nye Li and said, "Nye Li, don't let your emotions affect your decisions. Becoming a disciple of my master is definitely a great opportunity. You don't have to give up just because of Venerable Flameless. Venerable Flameless' father once saved Master and is also Master's eldest disciple. Master usually takes good care of him. He's a little narrow-minded, but you don't have to worry about it. As long as you become Master's disciple, you won't have to worry about him doing anything to you." Nye Li transmitted his voice back to Venerable Red Soul. "Venerable, I know what I'm doing." It was impossible for Nye Li to compromise. If worst came to worst, he'd just refuse to become Hierarch Skycloud's disciple. Venerable Flameless was also a perceptive person. When he saw that Hierarch Skycloud wasn't speaking, a cold light flashed through his eyes. He coldly laughed and looked at Nye Li. "What kind of place do you think the Skycloud Hall is? You think you can come and go as you please? What a joke! A heavenly fate, realm, cultivator really thinks of himself as a big shot?" Hearing Venerable Flameless' words, Nye Li wasn't angry. He replied in a tone that was neither servile nor overbearing. "Venerable, I respect Hierarch Skycloud and am willing to become his disciple. However, I'm only asking for Hierarch Skycloud's opinion. Whether he agrees or not is Hierarch Skycloud's business. Isn't it a little unnecessary for you to jump around here?" "You!" Venerable Flameless was furious. If they were in the outside world and a heavenly fate realm and, like Nye Li, dared to speak to him in such a manner, he'd already be dead. Aside from Venerable Flameless, the other 4 venerables couldn't help taking another glance at Nye Li. Since Nye Li dared to rebuke Venerable Flameless in such a neither servile nor overbearing manner, he probably wasn't just an ordinary Heaven's Fate realm expert. The four Venerable Ones were wary of Nye Li, but they were not the kind of people who would take the initiative to stir up trouble, so they did not interrupt. He was observing Nye Li. Hierarch Skycloud smiled and said, "Nye Li is right. Recruiting disciples is a matter of mutual consent. Even for me, recruiting disciples depends on whether Nye Li is willing or not. There's no need to say anything about the others." But Master, Venerable Flameless was still unwilling. Hierarch Skycloud actually tolerated Nye Li's insensible behavior? There's no need to say anything more. Hierarch Skycloud frowned slightly, looking a little displeased. When he saw Hierarch Skycloud's expression, Venerable Flameless immediately stopped speaking. He knew that Hierarch Skycloud was already a little angry. He could only respectfully stand to the side. Hierarch Skycloud looked at Nye Li and said with a smile, "Nye Li, I saw that one of the words you wrote for me was the word woo. What do you think of it?" He had the intention to test Nye Li. This word means that there's a path to inaction, and let nature take its course. Inaction means nothing, and inaction means something, Nye Li said. There's a path to inaction? Hierarch Skycloud was clearly stunned. He thought that his comprehension of void and inaction was already quite profound. He did not expect that Nye Li's "there's a path to inaction" would be even more profound. He couldn't help but murmur, "There's no inaction means nothing. There's a path to inaction." A moment later he sighed with emotion. "It's indeed profound and profound. I'm truly ashamed of my inferiority." Everyone was stunned when they heard Hierarch Skycloud's words. Even Venerable Red Soul and the others were shocked, speechless. Hierarch Skycloud actually said that he was ashamed of his inferiority? Who was Hierarch Skycloud? He was a martial ancestor realm expert. He was one of the 5 giants of the Hagami Myunmyun. In the eyes of Venerable Flameless, Venerable Red Soul, and the others, Hierarch Skycloud was an invincible existence. But in terms of Tao intent, he actually thought that he was inferior to Nye Li. This completely subverted their understanding. This guy must have obtained some secret manual from somewhere. He's just using it to fool people. Venerable Flameless couldn't help thinking that. He didn't believe that a heavenly fate realm ant like Nye Li could have such a deep comprehension of Tao intent. If Nye Li's comprehension of Tao intent was really that deep, his cultivation would have advanced by leaps and bounds a long time ago. How could he still be in the heavenly fate realm? What Venerable Flameless didn't know was that Nye Li's cultivation of Tao intent had indeed reached that level. His cultivation should have advanced by leaps and bounds a long time ago, and he might have already broken through to the heavenly star realm. However, because of the vine in his body, Nye Li's cultivation hadn't been able to break through. The other 4 venerables looked at each other in dismay before they looked at Nye Li with a strange expression. No matter what, even their master had admitted that he was inferior. They couldn't help but re-evaluate this youth before them. At the very least, they'd placed Nye Li on the same level as them. Hierarch Skycloud, you must be joking. I merely obtained this comprehension by chance. Compared to Hierarch Skycloud, I'm still too inferior, Nye Li hurriedly said. He couldn't possibly say that he'd been reborn. You're too modest. Even if one had comprehended it from an ancient book, it was already very impressive for one to be able to write the comprehension from the ancient book into words. Although I don't have much to teach you in terms of Tao intent, I can still give you some pointers on the path of cultivation. If you're willing to become my disciple, you can come and go as you please in the Skycloud Hall from now on. You won't be restricted by anyone. Hierarch Skycloud lightly smiled. Then I'll have to thank Lord Master. Nye Li hastily bowed. The Master of the Nether Realm probably wouldn't say anything if Hierarch Skycloud wanted to accept him as his disciple. In fact, he might even be overjoyed. God knows how many people wanted to have a relationship with Hierarch Skycloud. only to retreat because of the disparity in their statuses. Having Hierarch Skycloud as his master would definitely be of great help to him in the future, when he'd be able to gain a foothold in the Hagami Munyan. Good, good, good. Hierarch Skycloud heartily laughed. Without a doubt, Niali was the disciple he admired the most among all the disciples he'd accepted. Venerable Red Soul couldn't help being somewhat astonished. He never imagined that his master would actually agree to Nya Li's conditions. This was the first time in the history of the Skycloud Hall that an exception had been made. Hierarch Skycloud was extremely strict with his disciples, but he seemed to be especially lenient with Niali. The other 4 venerables were also a little surprised. It seemed that Niali would become the most special disciple in the Skycloud Hall. Furthermore, Hierarch Skycloud regarded Niali with great importance. In the future, they would have to get along well with this junior brother of theirs. Venerable Flameless eyes flashed with a trace of jealousy. Nya Li's appearance made him feel a great threat. He had always been the eldest disciple of Hierarch Skycloud, the one that received the most attention. However, Hierarch Skycloud had made an exception for Niali. It was obvious that Hierarch Skycloud regarded Niali with great importance. Hierarch Skycloud brightly laughed and said, "Everyone else can leave. I want to stay here and discuss Tao intent with Niali." After receiving Hierarch Skycloud's instructions, Venerable Red Soul and the others bowed and retreated. Venerable Flameless angrily glared at Nya Li and also retreated. Nya Li stayed in the main hall and chatted with Hierarch Skycloud. They discussed Tao intent for several hours. Hierarch Skycloud's eyes grew brighter and brighter. Everything Nya Li said was beneficial to him. He had truly dug up a precious gem. He believed that with Nya Li's talent, it wouldn't be long before he blossomed into a dazzling brilliance. It wouldn't be impossible for him to become Hagami Munyan's future pillar. Hierarch Skycloud thought of Hagami Munyan's precarious situation and became even more attentive to Nya Li. Chapter 344. Outside the Skycloud Hall, in a certain courtyard, Venerable Flameless was drinking by himself with a face full of resentment. Right at this moment, a handsome young man walked over and said with a smile, "Brother Wien seems to have encountered something that makes you very unhappy?" This person was the first-in-line successor to the Dragon Seal family, Long Tianming. "Brother Long, since you're here, accompany me for a drink." Venerable Flameless waved his hand when he saw Long Tianming. Long Tianming sat down and poured himself a cup of wine. "I wonder what Brother Flameless is vexed about." Venerable Flameless gloomily said, "Sigh, don't mention it. I've been cultivating with the old man for 30 years. I've been loyal and devoted to him, but I've always felt that he's guarded against me. He's never taught me the most crucial mnemonic chant of the Skycloud God technique. I've mentioned many times that I want to learn the final mnemonic chant, but he's always brushed me off with the excuse that the time isn't ripe. Hierarch Skycloud is selfless, and he's done his utmost for Hagami Munyan. He's our role model. Brother Flameless, aren't you overthinking things?" Long Tianming said without batting an eyelid. "Selfless? Haha, I've done my utmost for him. So why can't he be selfless for me? Is he afraid that his disciple will starve to death? If it wasn't for my father saving his life, would he still be where he is today?" Venerable Flameless sneered. "If it's just this matter, then Brother Flameless doesn't need to be vexed. Among all the disciples, Brother Flameless is the one that receives the most attention. If Hierarch Skycloud really wants to choose the successor of the Skycloud God technique, I reckon that you'll be the one." Long Tianming said. Venerable Flameless snorted and said with dissatisfaction, "I used to think so as well, but now this old man has recruited a new disciple. His name is Nya Li or something. The old man seems to be extremely fond of him, judging from his attitude towards him. He's practically treating him like a treasure." Long Tianming's eyes flashed with a strange light. A strange light flashed through Long Tianming's eyes. Hierarch Skycloud's new disciple is called Nye? That's right. You know him as well. I have. This Nye Li came from the tiny world. He's one of the more outstanding ones amongst the newcomers. Long Tianming's brows twitched. Nye Li's methods truly weren't simple. In such a short time, he'd actually become Hierarch Skycloud's disciple. And recently, Long Yuan and Nye Li are very close. It seems that after listening to Nye Li's words, Long Yuan began to gather some people to establish a force, ready to compete for the position of the Dragon Seal family's patriarch. A brat at the Heaven's Mandate realm only knows how to use some tricks to please the old man. Venerable Flameless said disdainfully. Venerable Flameless, it would be a grave mistake if you completely look down on him. In my opinion, this person isn't simple at all. If we don't deal with him as soon as possible, I'm afraid he'll become a threat in the future. Who knows, Hierarch Skycloud might have been deceived and imparted the Skycloud cultivation technique to him. Long Tianming said with his brows knitted. Brother Long, what do you think we should do? Venerable Flameless looked at Long Tianming. He never thought that even Long Tianming would care so much about this, Nye Li. How about this? Long Tianming whispered in Venerable Flameless' ears. At Long Tianming's words, Venerable Flameless' brows slowly relaxed. After leaving the Skycloud Hall, Nye Li was in a pretty good mood. Being able to become Hierarch Skycloud's disciple would definitely be of great help to his future plans. In the Hagami, one of the requirements to become a patriarch was to obtain the support of at least one of the 5 heavyweights. Otherwise, he wouldn't be qualified to do so. He had to obtain the support of at least one of the 5 giants. Although it hadn't been long since Nye Li became Hierarch Skycloud's disciple, and he still couldn't obtain Hierarch Skycloud support, Nye Li still believed in him. In the future, he could slowly obtain Hierarch Skycloud's trust. When Nye Li returned to Xiao Yu's courtyard, Li Xingyun, Gu Bei, and Lu Piao had already returned with excitement written all over their faces. How was it? Nye Li looked at Li Xingyun and the others as he asked with a smile. We ambushed 2 of the Blood Moon Union strongholds and killed over 1,000 of them. We only lost a little over 60 people. Although the people we killed weren't strong, and there weren't many Heavenly Revolution, Heavenly Star experts, it was still enough to make the Blood Moon Union suffer. Lu Piao said excitedly, the results are pretty good. We've already figured out the Blood Moon Union's situation. Once your fate soul stabilizes, we'll find an opportunity to destroy their deities' lakes and make them so poor that they can't even feed themselves. Li Xingyun smiled. Furthermore, we've also received news that one of Gu Heng's trusted aides has been embezzling spiritual stones from the Blood Moon Union through some hidden methods. However, Gu Heng trusts him very much, so the Blood Moon Union doesn't dare to say anything. Who knows? This might be a breakthrough for us. As long as we give him enough benefits and threaten him, he'll sell out Gu Heng. Gu Bei smiled as she continued, should we go and meet him? Yes, of course I will. Nye Li lightly smiled. Hagami Munyan, Bright Mountain Stronghold, this was the place where the Hagami Munyan's businesses were most concentrated. The majority of the Hagami Munyan's disciples would trade their goods here. It was even larger than the Skysoul Institute's market. Furthermore, there were many restaurants, brothels, and auction houses gathered here. Many beauties and merchants from various cities and small worlds were also gathered here. The dozens of streets in the Bright Mountain stronghold were filled with people. Inside a brothel, a group of people were eating, drinking, and having fun. One of them, a strong man, was holding 2 beautiful women in his arms. He was laughing like a madman. If you serve me well today, I'll reward each of you with a spirit stone. This strong man was Gu Heng's deacon, Higuei. Hearing Higuei's words, the eyes of the 2 beauties beside him lit up. One of the beauties walked to Higuei's side and whispered, Deacon He, there are several lords inside that want to see you. Higuei was a little bored as he replied, What lords? If they disturb my interest, I won't see anyone. The lords inside say they want to make a big deal with you for 100,000 spirit stones. The beauties quickly continued. 100,000 spiritual stones transaction? Higue's brows twitched. What a big tone. However, he was still tempted. He stood up and said, "All right then, I'll go take a look." Under the lead of the beauties, Higue walked inside. He walked along the long corridor and entered a room. "You guys are..." Higue raised his head and looked ahead. When he saw Nie Li, Gu Bei, Lu Piao, and Li Xingyun, his eyes flashed with a trace of fear. He immediately wanted to leave, but the door was already closed. "Deacon He, long time no see." Gu Bei lightly smiled. "Young Master Gu Bei, what business do you have with me?" Higue's voice was slightly trembling as he looked at Gu Bei. He could sense that there were at least 5 Heavenly Axis realm experts around the room. It was practically impossible for him to escape. "Deacon He, I want you to help us with something," Gu Bei said with a faint smile. "What is it?" Higue nervously asked. "From now on, no matter where Gu Heng goes, you have to report his whereabouts to us." Gu Bei sat on a chair, took a sip of tea, and lightly said, "You want me to betray young Master Gu Heng? That's impossible," Higue hastily said. "Higue, a wise man submits to circumstances. What future can you have by following Gu Heng? As a deacon, you only get a few hundred spiritual stones in your pocket every month. We won't force you. If you're willing to cooperate with us, we can give you 2,000 spiritual stones every time you report Gu Heng's whereabouts. If you're not willing to cooperate, Gu Bei, might not be able to do anything to Gu Heng, but do you think I can't deal with you? Furthermore, your hands and feet aren't clean either. If Gu Heng finds out about this, you know what the consequences will be." Gu Bei chuckled as she looked at Higue. "That will depend on yourself. Do you want to cooperate with us or not?" Gu Bei spoke very casually, but Higue could clearly feel the threat in his words. His forehead was already dripping with cold sweat. No matter what, Gu Bei was still the first-in-line successor of the Gu clan. If he was determined to deal with Higue, then Higue really didn't have any methods to resist. Indeed, it was as Gu Bei had said. Higue's hands and feet weren't clean. If he was exposed, he wouldn't be able to stay under Gu Heng. "Since you're not willing, then forget it. Nie Li, Brother Xingyun, let's go." Gu Bei signaled to Nie Li and the others with her eyes. "Wait, young Master Gu Bei," Higue hastily called out to Gu Bei. Chapter 345. Hearing Higue's words, Gu Bei sat back down in a leisurely and contented manner. Higue gritted his teeth and finally made up his mind. "I can cooperate with young Master Gu Bei. However, young Master Gu Bei must keep this matter a secret for me. Of course, as long as you cooperate with us, you'll be one of us in the future. We'll help you keep it a secret. Moreover, it'll definitely be much better than you following Gu Heng. We'll definitely not be stingy with those who are useful to us," Gu Bei said with a smile. Higue's compromise was completely within his expectations. However, he still had to guard against Higue's tricks. Higue pondered for a moment before he raised his head and looked at Gu Bei. "Young Master Gu Bei, I have a request. I wonder if young Master Gu Bei can agree to it?" "What request?" "Young Master Gu Heng's right-hand man. One is me, and the other is Chayu. This person has never been on good terms with me. I'd like to ask young Master Gu Bei to help me take him down." Higue's eyes flashed with a hint of ruthlessness. "That's not a problem." Gu Bei immediately nodded. Chayu was Gu Heng's trusted aide. It was said that Chayu was loyal to Gu Heng. If they wanted to deal with Gu Heng, they naturally had to clip his wings first. Gu Bei thought for a moment and said, "After you go back, spread some news that Chayu has been in contact with us in private. I'm afraid this alone won't be enough to make young Master Gu Heng suspect Chayu." Higue thought for a moment and said, "The rest is up to you. As long as you can leak Gu Heng's location to us and let us kill Gu Heng once, I'm afraid Gu Heng will suspect Chayu. At that time, we'll add fuel to the fire. It'll be hard for Gu Heng not to suspect Chayu, Gu Bei said with a smile. Young Master Gu Bei is wise, he Gue flattered. Okay, it's time for you to show your sincerity. Write some letters that you've secretly sent to us. If you play any tricks during the cooperation, then these letters will be sent to Gu Heng's hands. Gu Bei looked at Higuei and faintly said, this way, Higuei's weakness would fall into their hands. At that time, if Higuei didn't cooperate, then Gu Bei would have a way to deal with him. I hope you don't play any tricks, or you know the consequences. Higuei understood that if he did not obey Gu Bei today, he would probably have a hard time in the future. After a moment of silence, he finally sat down, picked up his pen, and began to write. According to Gu Bei's request, he wrote 6 letters. They were all letters expressing their loyalty to Gu Bei. Not bad, not bad. Gu Bei nodded her head and patted Higuei's shoulder. Her right hand moved and threw an interspatial ring to Higuei. There were more than 2,000 spiritual stones inside and said, this is your reward. If you help us in the future, we won't treat you unfairly. Higuei took the interspatial ring and glanced at it. His eyebrows couldn't help but twitch. There were more than 2,000 spiritual stones in this interspatial ring. If he followed Gu Heng for a month and took risks, he would only be able to get 200 to 300 spiritual stones. However, Gu Bei had casually given him more than 2,000 spiritual stones. Sure enough, following Gu Bei would have a much better future. Many thanks, young Master Gu Bei, Higuei said with a deeply grateful expression. After a moment, Higuei returned. Nieli, what do you think? Gu Bei looked at Nieli and asked, is Higuei reliable? This person values money. Since we've already promised him great benefits and have a handle on him, there's no need to be afraid of him not listening. He should be able to think things through. If he goes against us, he will definitely suffer, Nieli said. Of Gu Heng's 2 subordinates, Higuei is a despicable person, but Chayu is a genius. Li Xingyun couldn't help sighing. If he's crippled by Gu Heng, he'll definitely die. It would be a pity if he was crippled by Gu Heng. Has Brother Xingyun had any contact with Chayu? Nya Li looked at Li Xingyun and asked. We've had some contact. I once invited him to our Cloudwalk alliance, but Chayu refused. Li Xingyun sighed with regret. Since that's the case, Brother Xingyun can continue to contact him. If one day he can no longer stay under Gu Heng, he will naturally think of Brother Xingyun. After all, other forces are not willing to accept a traitor, Nieli said. Okay, Li Xingyun nodded his head. As long as it's a talent, he wouldn't want to miss it. Since we're already here, why don't we go buy some stuff? Nya Li said after a brief pondering. Sure. Li Xingyun and the other 2 nodded their heads. The group headed towards an artifact trading company called the Heavenly Treasure Pavilion. This was the largest artifact trading company in the Bright Mountain Stronghold. Even the higher-ups of the divine sects would often come here to purchase items. In the Draconic Ruins realm, aside from the divine sects, there were also some powerful forces. For example, the Artifact Pavilion, which specialized in forging artifacts and selling them to the divine sects. There were also some super trading companies, which weren't any weaker than the divine sects. Inside the Heavenly Treasure Pavilion, Li's group of 4 walked into the lobby. Immediately, an old man wearing a long robe walked up and smiled amiably. For young masters, welcome to our Heavenly Treasure Pavilion. May I ask what you're looking for? Boss, are there any artifacts that can protect or kill people here? Lu Piao asked as she looked around. The old man couldn't help smiling. Most of the artifacts I sell here are for protecting or killing people. I just don't know what grade the 4 young masters are looking for. Bring out the best you have here and let us have a look, Nieli said. Hearing Nieli's words, The old man's brows slightly twitched with a surprised expression. He looked at Nya Li's group of 4 and smiled. "Please follow me." Although Nya Li's group of 4 were dressed simply, they were probably the young masters of some forces. Otherwise, they wouldn't have asked for the best right off the bat. Under the old man's lead, Nya Li's group of 4 walked towards the deepest part of the Heavenly Treasure Pavilion. In the deepest part of the Heavenly Treasure Pavilion, there was a secret room. This room had hundreds of artifacts of various types on display. All of them were of high grade. Nya Li could feel that there were many powerful experts hidden in this room. At the very least, they were all at the Tao of Dragon level. Nya Li's group of 4 walked in. "Why are there other people here?" A voice came from inside, sounding a little impatient. "Young master, I'm sorry, but as long as you are a customer of the Heavenly Treasure Pavilion, you can come here if you want to buy artifacts of 5th grade and above." A young girl's voice patiently replied. Li Xingyun's gaze fell on the other party, and she frowned. The person inside also raised his head and looked at the 4 of them. When his eyes met with Li Xingyun's, he revealed a cold expression. Nya Li noticed Li Xingyun's expression and transmitted his voice to Li Xingyun. "Who is he?" "Li Yufeng." Li Xingyun calmed herself down and replied in a low voice. Hearing Li Xingyun's words, Nya Li's group of 3 understood. So it turned out that enemies were bound to meet on a narrow road. They just happened to bump into Li Xingyun's archenemy, the one who stole Li Xingyun's dragon bloodline god level growth rate demon spirit, Li Yufeng. Thinking back, Li Yufeng seemed to want to swallow up the Tianqing League. "I never thought that it would be cousin Xingyun. Since you're here, let's sit together." Li Yufeng laughed. "I never thought that cousin Xingyun would have the money to buy artifacts in the Heavenly Treasure Pavilion." If it was someone else, Li Xingyun might have made some small talk. However, when it came to Li Yufeng, Li Xingyun couldn't even be bothered to do so. However, he didn't show any signs of anger. He calmly sat down, completely treating Li Yufeng as heir. Seeing this, Nya Li's group of 3 completely ignored Li Yufeng and sat down beside Li Xingyun. Even if Li Xingyun replied to him in a bad mood, Li Yufeng wouldn't care. However, when Nya Li's group of 4 arrogantly treated him as heir, Li Yufeng became even angrier. The corner of his mouth slightly twitched as he turned around, no longer paying attention to Nya Li's group of 4. Chapter 346. My name is Kai Dai. May I ask what you 4 young masters would like to buy? A cute and sweet-looking girl sat down in front of Nya Li and the other 3. Her soft voice could melt one's bones. The Celestial Treasure Pavilion really knows how to do business. To send such a beautiful lady over. We can't not spend some money. Gu Bei chuckled. Young master is overpraising me. How could Kai Dai be worthy of such praise? The girl said with a little shyness. Gu Bei had once again revealed his true colors as a hedonistic young master. Kai Dai's cheeks were boiling hot from looking at him. Nya Li patted Gu Bei's shoulder and helplessly said, "All right, let's get down to business." Nya Li looked at Kai Dai and asked, "Miss Kai Dai, I would like to purchase a few grade 6 and above artifacts. I wonder what you have here." Grade 6 and above artifacts? Kai Dai was stunned for a moment. A grade 6 artifact was worth tens of thousands of spiritual stones. The entire Celestial Treasure Pavilion only had a few dozen of them. As for those above grade 6, they were even rarer. And Nya Li actually said that he wanted to buy a few? A grade 6 artifact armor was something that even a Heavenly Axis realm expert would have a hard time breaking through. As for those of a higher grade, they'd probably have to go to the Legendary Gods Craft Pavilion to buy them. It's impossible to buy them around Hagami Myunmyun. On the side, Li Yufeng was a little absent-minded. The girl in front of Li Yufeng called out, "Young master, do you still want this artifact?" "This artifact is a little expensive. Let's change it." Li Yufeng shook his head and said awkwardly. The grade 6 artifact in front of him was sold for over 50,000 spiritual stones. With such an expensive price, if he bought it, he wouldn't have many spiritual stones left. Oh, the girl looked a little disappointed and continued. If young master wants to look at other artifacts, I Wu Dai will help you get them. Li Yufeng looked at the wall and saw a dazzling array of artifacts. Even the lowest was a grade 5 artifact. His gaze fell onto a grade 5 artifact and said, Miss Wu Dai, can you help me get that one? On Nye Li's side, they didn't care about Li Yufeng's situation and just chatted among themselves. Although artifacts can be easily stolen after being killed, if you have a set of grade 6 artifacts, even if you're a Heavenly Axis Realm expert, it'll be extremely difficult to kill you. As for Tao of Dragon Realm experts, they won't appear in the outside world near Hagami, Mianmian. They'll definitely head deeper into the outside world. Gubei said. Li Xingyun looked at Nye Li and smiled. We'll have to see what Nye Li thinks. Nye Li said, since you're buying them, then everyone will naturally have a share. It's not like you're buying them for me alone. Everyone was stunned as they looked at Nye Li. A grade 6 artifact was worth tens of thousands of spiritual stones. How many was Nye Li going to buy? And he was going to give one to everyone. Nye Li swept his gaze across the surrounding walls. He looked at the artifacts hanging above and pointed to the distance. Miss Kai Dai, can you help me get that artifact? It was a grade 6 artifact, the meteorite sword. This young master has good eyesight. This grade 6 artifact, the meteorite sword, is definitely the best amongst the grade 6 artifacts. Its sharpness can even cut through ordinary grade 6 artifacts. Kai Dai said with a smile. She elegantly took the meteorite sword and placed it on the table. Good sword. Gubei's eyes lit up when she saw the cold glint on the sword's edge. She cultivated sword intent, so she was naturally fond of swords. How many spiritual stones does this sword cost? Nye Li looked at Kai Dai and asked. This meteorite sword is worth 76,000 spiritual stones. Kai Dai said with a smile. 76,000 spiritual stones? Lu Piao and the others were shocked. This meteorite sword was quite expensive. Upon hearing Kai Dai's words, Nye Li smiled and said, Miss Kai Dai, are you selling it for 36,000 spiritual stones? If you're willing to sell it, we'll take it. Kai Dai was stunned when she heard Nye Li's words. It took her a while to recover. This meteorite sword was sold for 76,000 spiritual stones. However, the actual selling price was actually around 35,000 spiritual stones. This was the Celestial Treasure Pavilion's bottom line. Generally speaking, those rich playboys who could afford the Starrock sword were all thin-skinned. Even if they could haggle, they wouldn't do it as ruthlessly as Nye Li. Furthermore, Nye Li was too powerful. He'd cut the price by half in an instant and brought it down to the lowest price. Kai Dai didn't know how to react. Sir, I'm afraid the Celestial Treasure Pavilion can't accept this price. Kai Dai pretended to be in a difficult position. This is the best price I can offer. If it's one more spiritual stone, I won't take it. Nye Li looked at Kai Dai with a smile. Ahem, all right. I'll sell this meteorite sword to you for 36,000 spiritual stones. Kai Dai replied with a bitter smile. She didn't know how to evaluate Nye Li. If Nye Li had haggled the price to 34,000 spiritual stones, she would definitely have bargained or refused to sell it. However, the price Nye Li offered was 36,000 spiritual stones, which was within the range of the Celestial Treasure Pavilion. She couldn't possibly reject a customer like Nye Li. Both Gubei and Li Xingyun stared blankly at Nye Li. They didn't know that the Celestial Treasure Pavilion could bargain like this. Furthermore, Nye Li had offered a 50% discount. The most shocking thing was that Kai Dai had actually agreed. On the other hand, Lu Piao wasn't surprised at all. Wasn't it normal to get a 50% discount? I'll buy this meteorite sword. Here's 36,000 spiritual stones. Nye Li smiled. After receiving the meteorite sword, he threw it to Gubei and said, This is for you. Thank you. Gu Bei was so excited that she couldn't control herself. She finally had a good sword to use. When Li Yufeng saw this scene, he was slightly stunned. It turned out that the Celestial Treasure Pavilion could bargain like this. Young Master Li, this grade 5 artifact, the Frost Piercer, costs 12,000 spiritual stones. What do you think? Wu Dai asked Li Yufeng. I'll pay 6,000 spiritual stones for this Frost Piercer, Li Yufeng said without hesitation. According to Nye Li's method of bargaining, the Celestial Treasure Pavilion's profits were too high. Having the price wouldn't be a problem at all. When she heard Li Yufeng's words, Wu Dai's expression froze. She smiled bitterly and said, Young Master Li, I'm afraid we can't accept this price. I'll only pay 6,000 spiritual stones. I won't take any more than that, Li Yufeng said resolutely. Wu Dai restrained her expression and said politely, I'm sorry, young Master Li. This Frost Piercer, 12,000 spiritual stones, is already the lowest price. Wu Dai put away the Frost Piercer and prepared to hang it back. When he heard Wu Dai's words, Li Yufeng's face darkened. When Nye Li offered a 50% discount, the girl on the other side immediately agreed. Why did Wu Dai accept the item when he offered a 50% discount? Li Yufeng was furious, but it wasn't good for him to flare up. Wu Dai couldn't help muttering in her heart. As the first-in-line successor of the Ashen Flames family, Li Yufeng actually had the nerve to ask for 6,000 spiritual stones. This Frost Piercer definitely wouldn't be sold for less than 10,000 spiritual stones. Chapter 347. Li Yufeng continued to look for other treasures. Nye Li was also looking around. His eyes swept over the dazzling array of armors and items before landing on a grade 6 treasure, the Silver Moon Saber. Let's buy a suitable weapon for Brother Xingyun. Nye Li smiled and said to Kai Dai next to him, Miss Kai Dai, please help me take that off. This is a grade 6 treasure, the Silver Moon Saber. Its price is about 50,000 spiritual stones. Kai Dai took down the silver moon knife from the shelf, pursed her lips, and said with a smile. Putting aside the frightening haggling, Nye Li was still very straightforward when he bought things, unlike many people who had to dawdle for a long time to buy things. 30,000 spiritual stones. Just say the word, Miss Kai Dai, Nye Li said with a calm smile. Kai Dai stared at Nye Li as if she had seen a ghost. This grade 6 treasure, the Silver Moon Saber, had a minimum price of 30,000 spiritual stones. Originally, she had thought that Nye Li would directly reduce the price by half and she would definitely refuse. She did not expect that Nye Li would directly state the minimum price. Refuse? Was he not going to do business? If it was a deal, it would be at the minimum price. Although the profit was not much, it was still a profit. With the spiritual stones, their Celestial Treasure Pavilion could go to Craftsman Pavilion to buy more treasures. After thinking about it, Kai Dai smiled helplessly and said, Young Master Nye Li has a keen eye and is extremely intelligent. Sold for 30,000 spiritual stones. Nye Li smiled faintly. Such a treasure would sell for about 27,000 spiritual stones in Craftsman Pavilion. After deducting the travel expenses and other costs, the Celestial Treasure Pavilion would definitely make a profit if it was sold for 30,000 spiritual stones. Of course, the Celestial Treasure Pavilion would not accept a lower price because there would not be any profit. Li Xingyun and Gu Bei were a bit speechless. From Kai Dai's expression, they could roughly feel that Nye Li had definitely stated a very low price. It seemed that they would have to bring Nye Li along when they went shopping in the future. This would really save them a lot of money. Miss Kai Dai, how much is the grade 6 treasure, Black Cloud Battle Armor? Nye Li looked at Kai Dai and asked. Young Master, state your price. If possible, I will sell it to you. Kai Dai thought for a moment and decided not to state her price. If she continued to state her price, people would know how much profit the Celestial Treasure Pavilion had. She wanted to see if Nye Li was particularly proficient in the price of treasures. Nieli pondered for a moment and said, "Arm guards, breastplate, gauntlets, leggings, and belt add up to 130,000 spiritual stones." After a while, Kaidai nodded and said, 130,000 spiritual stones." She nodded and said, "Then 130,000 spirit stones." What else could she say? With so many items, Nyat Li's offer was only 5,000 spirit stones away from the base price. What kind of monster was he? This time, he had finally met an expert. However, Nieli was really straightforward when it came to buying things. He didn't even bat an eyelid when it came to spending tens of thousands of spirit stones. Kai Dai continued to ask Nieli, "Does young master need anything else?" "That armor costs 120,000 spirit stones. That set costs 125,000 spirit stones. That set 135,000 spiritual stones." Nyat Li pointed to one side, then to the other. "So many. Young lord wants all of them?" Kai Dai was stunned. Only now did she realize. The total value of what Nyat Li had bought had already reached an extremely shocking level. Nieli nodded and said, "Wrap these up first. I'll look at the rest later." "Okay." Kai Dai seemed to be a little excited. Serving these rich young masters here. Every time they sold an item, they could get dozens or even hundreds of spirit stones as a reward. With Nia Li's transactions, she could get at least 1,000 spirit stones. How could she not be excited? Wu Dai, who was sitting next to Li Yufeng, looked at the excited Kai Dai and felt depressed. She had been recommending to Li Yufeng for a long time, but not a single item had been sold. Kai Dai had only been here for a short time, but she had already sold so many items. This was more than what she had sold in the past few years. Why didn't she meet a group of rich people like this? Wu Dai looked at Li Yufeng and felt depressed in her heart. She was a little dispirited. This Li Yufeng didn't want anything, but he still tried to haggle the price. Did he want to buy it or not? Li Yufeng was also very embarrassed. He chose a few items in succession, wanting to haggle like Nieli. However, Wu Dai rejected him. Every item here was very expensive. He had to think twice before buying. But when he saw Nieli buying this and that not far away, he felt depressed. Even some of the grand elders of the Hagami Minyan weren't as rich as Nieli, right? What he didn't know was that although he had spent 600,000 spirit stones, it was nothing to Nieli. Nieli still had millions of spirit stones on hand, and the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting would produce an endless supply of spirit stones in the future. Kai Dai turned her head and realized that 60 to 70% of the grade 6 artifacts here have already been bought by Nieli. This was a true rich man. He had spent more than 600,000 spirit stones in one go. Li Yufeng stared at Nia Li, wondering what kind of person Nia Li was. What kind of role did he play in the Tianqing League? And what kind of relationship did he have with Li Xingyun? With such a person by Li Xingyun's side, it really made him unable to eat or sleep in peace. If he continued to stay here, he would lose face. Li Yufeng stood up. "Young Master Li, are you preparing to leave?" Wu Dai looked at Li Yufeng. Li Yufeng still hadn't bought a single item. Although she was depressed, she still politely said, "It seems that young Master Li doesn't like the items in our heavenly treasure pavilion. We'll send someone to inform young Master Li when we have new items." Li Yufeng couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. He clearly couldn't afford it. "All right, I'll take my leave first." Li Yufeng cupped his hands at Wu Dai and coldly glanced at Nieli and the others before looking away. Li Yufeng left. Li Yufeng is a narrow-minded person. You all have to be careful in the future. Li Xingyun couldn't help but say as she watched Li Yufeng leave. She clenched her fists as she recalled the events of the past. Nieli nodded. He was very clear about the grudge between Li Xingyun and Li Yufeng. After buying so many items, everyone received a set of battle armor. Gu Bei, Lu Piao, and Li Xingyun each received a suitable weapon. As for Nelly, he didn't need to buy any weapons, since he already had the Thunder God's meteorite sword. The Thunder God's meteorite sword's power would constantly increase as Nia Li's strength increased. Right now, the Thunder God's meteorite sword was already comparable to a grade 7 artifact. Therefore, there was no need for Nia Li to buy a new offensive artifact. The group had a bountiful harvest as they walked out of the Heavenly Treasure Pavilion. With this battle armor, even if we encounter a Heavenly Axis realm expert in the outside world, there's nothing to be afraid of. Lu Piao said excitedly. She realized that the moment she was attacked, the fiery meteorite battle armor would form a powerful defensive force around her body. Even if she couldn't defeat a Heavenly Axis realm expert, escaping would still be very easy. After putting on the battle armor and a set of ordinary clothes, it wouldn't be noticeable at all. Although they'd put on a coat, whether it was Lu Piao, Gu Bei, or Li Xingyun, all of them felt a lot more confident. After all, this was a complete set of grade 6 artifact. Wearing it gave them a refreshing feeling. They couldn't help puffing out their chests. Chapter 348. East District. The first batch of people to enter the East District had already been determined. Nia Li, Gu Bei, Lu Piao, Long Yuan, and a youth called Shuiyu. A total of 5 people. Originally, Jin Yan had thought that he'd definitely be able to enter the East District. However, a youth called Shuiyu had suddenly appeared out of nowhere. His cultivation had far surpassed his expectations and replaced him, causing Jin Yan to fly into a rage. However, things had already turned out this way, and Jin Yan was powerless to change the situation. Nelly, I heard that there's a person called Shuiyu who entered the East District with us. Why don't we have any impression of this Shuiyu? Lu Piao asked in doubt. She didn't even know that there was such a person in the class. Even Nia Li only knew that there was a youth called Shuiyu in the class. He was usually very quiet and never spoke to anyone. His strength also didn't seem to be anything special. However, he'd suddenly appeared, surpassed Jin Yan, and entered the East District with them. This person isn't simple, Nia Li said after a moment of silence. Get Li Xingyun to help investigate his background. However, try not to incur any enmity with him. Okay. Lu Piao nodded her head. Aside from Nia Li's group of 5, there were also a few others who'd entered the East District. They were all from the previous batch, and Xiaoyu was one of them. East District Martial Arts Field. The field was extremely spacious, and it was covered with layers of barriers. There were 500 to 600 students gathered in the martial arts field, all of whom were from the East District. A group of teachers sat at the front of the martial arts field, observing the 60 new students. They were all discussing in low voices. Huang Yu, Nanmen Tianhai, and a few others were also present. There's a total of 60 people who've entered the East District this year. Some of them are pretty good. I heard that there are 5 geniuses from the latest batch. Gu Bei, Long Yuan, and that Nia Li are both here. Huang Yu sat in the center as he swept his gaze across the students. He smiled and said, among the new batch of students, there are quite a few with 5-grade heaven spiritual roots and above. Furthermore, Gu Bei of the Gu family and Long Yuan of the Dragon Seal family have both integrated with Dragon Bloodline God level growth rate demon spirits. They're truly formidable. With a Dragon Bloodline God level growth rate demon spirit, there's a high chance of entering the Central District. Nanmen Tianhai knocked on the table. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly as he said, according to the rules of the East Courtyard, new students must challenge the seniors of the East Courtyard to warn them that there is always someone better out there. Let the competition begin. Nia Li and the others arrived at the training field. He had already received the notice that every batch of new students who entered the East Courtyard had to challenge the seniors of the East Courtyard. This could be considered a show of strength to make the new students restrain their arrogance and cultivate in the East Courtyard. Nia Li's gaze swept across the students of the East Courtyard. Li Xingyun was there as well. He also saw a few familiar faces, including Morongyu. Morongyu's cold gaze fell on Nieli and the others as he snorted. Enemies were bound to meet on a narrow road. He never thought that he'd bump into Nieli and the others so soon. The East Courtyard has a total of 600 students, all of whom are ranked. With the newest batch, the previous batch's number 1 genius was Morongyu, who's currently ranked around 132. The previous batch's genius was Li Xingyun, who was ranked 78. The previous batch's number 1 genius was Gu Heng, who's already entered the Central District. Only a few dozen people were able to enter the Central District. As for the remaining geniuses, most of them can only advance to the East Courtyard. Once their cultivation reaches the Heavenly Star Realm, they'll become Hagami Munyun's inner disciples. Afterwards, they'll be sent to various places to carry out missions. Of course, many people have other choices. Gu Bei gave Nieli a rough introduction of the East Courtyard situation. Those who are able to enter the Central District are all super geniuses. If you want to become the leader of a large family, or the patriarch of Hagami Munyun, there's one thing you must do. That is enter the Central District. The geniuses who enter the Central District will be personally taught by the 5 strongest martial ancestor realm experts of Hagami Munyun. Long Yuan added. She was dressed in a neat and tidy outfit, and her battle intent was boiling. Nieli nodded. He'd also heard about this in his previous life. Only by continuously challenging the rankings and entering the top 10 would they be chosen to enter the Central District. However, many of the top 10 were experts from earlier batches. Even Li Xingyun was only ranked 78th. Of course, back then, Li Xingyun had only integrated with an extraordinary level growth rate dragon bloodline demon spirit. Now that she had a god level growth rate dragon bloodline demon spirit, her ranking would probably increase. However, Li Xingyun hadn't announced the fact that he had a dragon bloodline god level growth rate demon spirit. When the students of the East Courtyard saw this batch of newcomers, they couldn't help revealing malicious smiles on their faces. Back then, when they'd entered the East Courtyard, they'd also been taught a terrible lesson. They simply couldn't bear to look back on it. Now, it was the turn of this batch of students. All the senior brothers of the East Courtyard are here. You can freely choose your opponent. Everyone can challenge 5 times. There are no restrictions on the number of challenges, but you can't kill anyone. Nanmen Tianhai's voice wasn't loud, but it echoed throughout the entire martial practice field. Each person could challenge 5 times. The new cohort of students looked at each other. They were obviously picking the weakest ones to fight. Although they didn't know what the rankings of the East District seniors were, they could roughly sense the strength of their opponents from their auras. Very quickly, some people began to choose their opponents. Nieli, Gu Bei, and Lu Piao exchanged glances. Gu Bei and Lu Piao were a little eager. Nieli, who's going to handle Morongyu? Nieli narrowed his eyes as he looked at Morongyu in the distance. I'll go. It's time to settle the score from the ghastly ruins. Morongyu couldn't help sneering when he noticed Nieli's gaze on him. From the start, he didn't believe that Nieli would dare to challenge him. Morongyu's cultivation had already reached 6th fate. Although he didn't know what level Nieli's cultivation was, he was certain that Nieli was still a far cry from him. Nieli pointed at Morongyu as he calmly said, I want to challenge him. The surrounding new students exchanged glances, then looked at Nieli in shock. Nieli actually dared to challenge Morongyu? That was simply too inconceivable. Morongyu was the previous year's number 1 genius. He was ranked in the top 200 of the East District. They definitely wouldn't dare to challenge someone like that because they'd definitely lose. As a new batch of students, being able to challenge some of the experts ranked at the bottom of the East District's rankings was already good enough. Nieli immediately challenged Morongyu. Didn't that mean he didn't know his own limits? Morong was also a little incredulous at Nia Li's words. Nia Li actually dared to challenge him? That was simply looking for a beating. Morong laughed heartily. Since junior brother Nia Li has such thoughts, then I'll give junior brother Nia Li some pointers. Morong eyes flashed with a fierce glint. He still regretted letting Nia Li go last time. He'd always wanted to teach Nia Li a lesson, but never had the chance. Now that Nia Li had delivered himself to his doorstep, he wouldn't hold back. Chapter 349. Nia Li leaped onto one of the stages, followed by Morong. Everyone's gazes were focused on the stage. Without a doubt, the battle between Nia Li and Morong was the most attention-grabbing one. One was the #1 genius from the previous tournament, while the other was the #1 genius from this tournament. Furthermore, there seemed to be a grudge between Nia Li and Morong. However, from their point of view, Nia Li was overestimating himself by challenging Morong. After all, the difference between their cultivation levels wasn't just a little bit. After all, Morong had cultivated for many more years than Nia Li. Huang Yu and Nanmen Tianhai exchanged glances. Nia Li actually challenged Morong. He's too daring, Huang Yu said. Nanmen Tianhai shook his head and sighed. It's inevitable for youngsters to be arrogant. They weren't optimistic about Nia Li's chances. After all, there was a gap of one tournament. Morong hadn't been able to defeat Li Xingyun yet. In the eyes of others, you might be a genius, but in my eyes, you're nothing. Last time, I was careless and let you escape. This time, I'll crush your head into the ground and ruthlessly crush it. I'll teach you to respect your senior brother. Morong stared at Nia Li and eerily said, You actually dare to challenge me now? In the eyes of others, you might be a genius, but in my eyes, you're nothing. A powerful aura burst out from Morong body, forming a powerful explosion around him. Although Morong was a 6 fate and Nia Li was only a 4 fate, it was still impossible for Morong to suppress Nia Li in terms of aura. Although he was only a 4 fate, Nia Li's true strength far exceeded that. However, Nia Li didn't release any of his aura. He only calmly looked at Morong. No matter how Morong tried to provoke him, or how he tried to destroy his confidence, Nia Li didn't put Morong in his eyes at all. That was because Morong and he weren't on the same level. Nia Li looked at Morong as he calmly said, So much nonsense. Can we start now? Morong tried to infuriate Nia Li, but he never imagined that Nia Li would completely ignore his words. It was as if he had punched the air. Humph, how arrogant. Morong waved his right hand, sending a stream of energy towards Nia Li. Whoosh! The energy turned into a stream of light. Just as the energy was about to hit Nia Li's body suddenly disappeared. His attack missed. Morong's pupils slightly contracted. He snorted coldly, This trick again! His eyes searched everywhere for traces of Nia Li. Right at that moment, Nia Li suddenly appeared out of thin air and slashed at Morong's neck. Humph! Too slow. Morong clenched his fists and sent a powerful punch towards Nia Li's chest. The fist force was filled with explosive power. The friction between the fist force and the air created sparks. Whoosh! Even when he saw Morong's punch, Nia Li didn't stop and continued to slash at Morong's neck. Nia Li actually wanted to use a life-risking method to perish together with him. How could Morong let Nia Li get what he wanted? He dodged to the side and dodged Nia Li's attack, then sent his fist towards Nia Li's chest with an incomparably ferocious force. If Nia Li was hit by that punch, he would undoubtedly die. The onlookers held their breaths. There was no way to dodge this attack. Sure enough, Nia Li's strength was far inferior to Morong's. Asterisk boom. Asterisk Morong's fist landed on Nia Li's chest. However, the rebounding force from his fist made Morong feel that something wasn't right. Something's wrong. Morong could feel the terrifying rebound force from his punch. It was so strong that it nearly crippled his arm. Before Morong Yu could react, Nya Li suddenly returned to his human form. He grabbed Morong Yu's arm and used the rebound to fling Morong Yu into the air, as if he was throwing a sandbag. Morong Yu spun in the air, then slammed into the ground. Boom! The pain from Morong Yu's arm hadn't subsided yet. He was slammed into the ground once again, causing him to feel dizzy. Just what's going on? The strength that Nya Li had used was at most a 3 heavenly fate realm. But why was he able to use his strength? Furthermore, why hadn't he injured Nya Li when his fist landed on Nya Li's chest? Instead, he'd suffered such a powerful rebound. Before Morong, you could figure out what was going on. Nya Li had thrown him into the air like a sandbag, then slammed him into the ground. Boom! Morong Yu felt as if all his organs were about to explode. Before Morong Yu could react, Nya Li had thrown him into the air once again. A dazzling series of moves sent Morong Yu flying into the air, then back to the ground. Bang! 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 Endless attacks landed on Morong Yu's body. Against Morong Yu, Nya Li hadn't used his full strength. From his point of view, it wasn't necessary at all. Looking at this scene, all the onlookers suddenly had a feeling that it was unreal. What was going on? Why was Morong Yu the one being beaten up? Logically speaking, Morong Yu's strength should be far above Nya Li's. But why wasn't Morong Yu able to retaliate against Nya Li's attacks? Why did nothing happen to Morong Yu's attacks when they landed on Nya Li's body? The only ones who noticed the problem were Huang Yu and Nanmen Tianhai. They exchanged glances. Huang Yu looked at Nanmen Tianhai and asked, "Does that kid Nya Li count as cheating?" Nanmen Tianhai bitterly smiled. "I don't think so. After all, we didn't limit ourselves to any methods." "You're going too far." Morong Yu suffered a series of blows. He tried to retaliate against Nya Li several times, but every time his fists landed on Nya Li's body, he would receive an even stronger backlash. He couldn't cause any damage to Nya Li. Morong Yu furiously roared as his skin turned a strange, blood-red color. Boom! 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 Waves of boundless energy burst forth from Morong Yu's body. A pair of huge scarlet wings suddenly unfurled from his back, and his body transformed into a mighty and awe-inspiring giant eagle. Heavens! It's a Saint Blood Draconic Eagle. It's a Saint Blood Draconic Eagle with an extraordinary growth rate. The Saint Blood Draconic Eagle was one of the top breeds amongst the Draconic Eagles. It could be said to be royalty amongst the Draconic Eagles. Furthermore, a Saint Blood Draconic Eagle with an extraordinary growth rate was extremely rare. No one knew where Morong Yu had gotten his hands on one. Morong Yu wasn't willing to integrate with his demon spirit earlier, so he was hiding his strength. Although a Saint Blood Draconic Eagle isn't a dragon bloodline god level growth rate demon spirit, it's still enough to dominate a region. It's the strongest existence, second only to a dragon bloodline god level growth rate demon spirit. Nya Li actually forced Morong Yu to integrate with his demon spirit. Morong Yu's eyes were blood red as he floated in the sky. His scarlet wings slowly flapped. Every time they flapped, an astonishing amount of energy burst forth. I didn't want to integrate with my demon spirit, but you forced my hand. Now, I'm going to thoroughly kill you. A powerful aura burst forth from Morong Yu's body as fiery clouds formed around him. Boundless, blazing energy enveloped his body, as if it wanted to destroy everything in its path. Waves of blazing energy surged towards Nya Li like raging waves. Everyone's expressions changed when they felt the energy overflowing from the stage. They never imagined that Morong Yu would have become so powerful. It looked like Morong Yu's ranking should have been pushed up a long time ago. In the face of this powerful energy, Nya Li took several steps back and raised his head to look at Morong Yu. Finally, Morong Yu wasn't holding back anymore and was displaying all of his strength. Chapter 350. So Morong-Yu had integrated with a Saint Blood Draconic Hawk. After forcing out Morong-Yu's demon spirit, Niali had a clear understanding of Morong-Yu's strength. Indeed, with Morong-Yu's 6 fate cultivation and his Saint Blood Draconic Hawk, even if Niali had the confidence to defeat Morong-Yu, it would be a bitter fight. He might even have to reveal his Dragon Bloodline God level demon spirit. Now wasn't the time to reveal the Saint Bloodwing Dragon. But why would Niali want to fight Morong-Yu? Niali had already made his preparations before his match with Morong-Yu. The corner of Niali's mouth hooked into a smile. Morong-Yu was destined to be miserable if he ran into him. Niali's right hand moved as he unsheathed the Thunder God's meteorite sword. Thick bolts of lightning converged on the Thunder God's meteorite sword, creating a spectacular scene. The divine lightning and Morong-Yu's energy fiercely clashed, causing a series of explosions in the air. On the stage, the two forces were evenly matched. The spectators were shocked. A single weapon was enough to contend against the Saint Bloodwing Dragon? Niali's weapon was probably a grade 7 or 8 artifact at the very least. Huang Yu and Nanmen Tianhai bitterly smiled as they exchanged glances. The stage didn't forbid the use of artifacts. After all, artifacts were a part of a person's strength. However, in the past, the artifacts used by the disciples of the East District were definitely much better than those used by the new geniuses. However, when it came to Niali, he seemed to be an exception. Although they didn't know what grade of artifact battle armor Niali was wearing, Huang Yu and Nanmen Tianhai were certain that it was at least a grade 4 artifact. Morong-Yu's fist energy couldn't penetrate it at all. But now, Niali had actually taken out a grade 7, or possibly even grade 8, offensive artifact. Niali didn't know what the artifact in Niali's hand was, but it could actually contend against his strength. However, he wanted to defeat me with just a single artifact? That's impossible. A cold light flashed through Morong-Yu's eyes. With a long howl, he swung his claws towards Niali. Those sharp claws were wrapped in a vast and mighty power. The aftermath caused the barrier around the martial arts arena to shake violently. This was Morong-Yu's attack, filled with rage. He had accumulated a boundless amount of energy, and the energy of the flames was like a torrential downpour from the sky. Boom, boom, boom. Some of the flames hit the ground. It caused the ground to instantly shatter and spread out like a spider web. The strength that Morong-Yu had displayed shocked everyone in the surroundings. They never imagined that Morong-Yu's strength would reach such a frightening degree. This time, Niali is dead for sure. The spectators around the stage discussed in low voices. He never imagined that Niali would be able to force Morong-Yu to use his full strength. They didn't believe that a newcomer like Niali would be able to contend against Morong-Yu. Boom, boom, boom. Pillars of flames landed on Niali's body. The energy of the flames blasted several large holes on Niali's body, revealing the faint silver battle armor underneath. Just as Niali was about to be engulfed by the terrifying flames, an invisible force spread out with Niali at the center, forming a barrier. The blazing energy of the flames continuously exploded, but they were all blocked by the barrier. They couldn't harm Niali in the slightest. Bang! The Saint Blood Draconic Hawk's claws landed on the barrier around Niali. A powerful rebound force caused the Saint Blood Draconic Hawk's body to freeze. This is impossible. Morong-Yu roared inwardly. He'd fused with the Saint Blood Draconic Hawk's attack. Even a 7 fate expert wouldn't be able to take a hit from it. But in the end, his attack didn't even leave a scratch on Niali's body. The instant Morong-Yu's attack came down, the corner of Niali's mouth curved into a smile. He brandished the Thunder God's meteorite sword in his hand. The energy of the divine lightning gathered around the Thunder God's meteorite sword. With a swing of the sword, a Leiju descended from the sky. With a loud bang, the Leiju landed on the Saint Blood Draconic Hawk. Morong-Yu instantly felt a powerful electric current run through his body. His entire body was numb to the point where he couldn't feel anything. An intense pain spread throughout his body. Although the Leju hadn't managed to kill him, he'd still suffered a heavy injury. "I'll kill you." Murong Yu seemed to have gone insane after suffering a heavy injury. He once again brandished his claws and clawed at Nye Li. Bang! Bang! Murong Yu's attacks rained down like a storm. However, he couldn't break through Nye Li's defenses. Nye Li completely ignored Murong Yu's attacks. Brandishing the Thunder God's meteorite sword, one Leju after another shot towards Murong Yu. Arg! 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 Every time the pillar of lightning struck, Murong Yu would let out a blood-curdling scream. One could only imagine how much pain Murong Yu was in right now. The surrounding spectators were all dumbfounded. The stage was filled with sparks and lightning, so they couldn't see what was going on. The battle looked very intense. But why was Murong Yu the one screaming the entire time? Could it be that Murong Yu was being trampled? But that shouldn't be the case. Murong Yu was a 6 Fate expert, and he'd even fused with the Saint Blood Draconic Hawk. Could it be that he still couldn't defeat Nye Li? Just how powerful was Nye Li? But the truth was right in front of their eyes. Huang Yu and Nan Mentianhai were dumbfounded as they watched Lei Zhu bombarding Murong Yu's body. Wasn't this too shameless? They'd never imagined that Nye Li wasn't wearing a grade 4 artifact battle armor, but a grade 6 artifact battle armor. Not to mention, it was a full set. It was already pretty good for an ordinary person to have a set of grade 4 artifact battle armor. But that brat, Nye Li, had actually gotten his hands on a full set of grade 6 artifact battle armor. Even a Heavenly Axis Realm expert might not be able to break through a full set of grade 6 artifact battle armor. And Murong Yu was only a 6 Fate. A full set of grade 6 artifact battle armor was simply too rare. Ordinary people had never seen one before, not even Murong Yu. Therefore, Murong Yu had no idea what was going on. He frantically attacked Nye Li, but what he didn't know was that his attacks were completely ineffective against Nye Li. Aside from a full set of grade 6 artifact battle armor, the lightning sword in Nye Li's hand wasn't simple either. The Leju that he wielded was extremely powerful, not to mention the fact that Nye Li was already a 4 Fate. Even if he was only a 1 Fate, he'd be able to crush Murong Yu to death with his luxurious attire. However, the most sinister thing was that Nye Li didn't have any intention of thoroughly defeating Murong Yu. Instead, he used Leju to attack Murong Yu again and again, torturing Murong Yu until he was hovering between life and death. Too ruthless. Huang Yu felt his scalp go numb. He'd heard that Murong Yu had once stepped on Nye Li in the ghastly ruins. This was probably Nye Li's revenge on Murong Yu. That's too despicable. Nan Mentianhai was speechless. He'd never encountered such a situation in any of the previous competitions. A newcomer wearing a grade 6 artifact battle armor was torturing a senior brother of the East District. There'd never been such a precedent, so there weren't any rules regarding this. After this incident, there'd probably be a new rule in the future. High-grade artifacts weren't allowed to be brought into the martial arts arena. Murong Yu's screams never stopped. Everyone knew what had happened with just one listen. Gu Bei and Lu Piao couldn't help laughing. They could already imagine Murong Yu's miserable state. Li Xingyun also couldn't help laughing. Nye Li had played Murong Yu so miserably. Chapter 351. While Nye Li and Murong Yu exchanged blows, two people were quietly sitting in a corner of the stage, sipping tea as they watched the match. One of them was Long Tianming, while the other wore a silver moon robe. His graceful bearing was even better than Long Tianming's. I never thought that Brother Beiyan would be interested in these newcomers. Long Tianming faintly smiled as he looked at the youth beside him. His words carried a hidden meaning. It seemed that their relationship wasn't that harmonious. I just wanted to see what kind of extraordinary genius he is that even you, Long Tianming, would care so much about. Situ Beiyan sat calmly and leisurely. Now that I look at it, it seems that this youth is rather interesting. He only managed to defeat Morongyu by relying on his artifacts. Long Tianming smiled. Brother Beiyan admires him so much? He comes from the tiny world and has no background. Yet, before entering the East District, he possessed a set of Grade 6 artifact battle armor and even became Hierarch Skycloud's disciple. Isn't that considered capable? Situ Beiyan smiled. I heard that he and Gu Bei established a force together. In just a few short months, they've grown to several thousand people. It looks like the outside world is going to be even more lively. Long Tianming looked at Situ Beiyan. He didn't know what Situ Beiyan was planning. Logically speaking, Situ Beiyan should have been vigilant when someone rose to power. Yet, he was sitting there watching a good show. Long Tianming didn't know what Situ Beiyan was planning. However, no matter what Situ Beiyan was thinking, Long Tianming wouldn't allow the Demon League to rise. Long Yuan had just established the Profound Note League, which was probably instigated by Nye Li. Long Tianming didn't know what Nye Li was planning, but he could feel that Nye Li's ambition wasn't small. It had already threatened him. At the very least, Long Tianming wouldn't allow Long Yuan to threaten his position as the Dragon Seal family's patriarch. Although Nye Li had given him 3 words, he hadn't been able to see through their profundity. He felt that he'd been tricked by Nye Li, but he had no way to verify it. Therefore, Long Tianming did not have a good impression of Nye Li. Today, there are people who are qualified to compete for the position of Hagami Munyan Patriarch. Currently, there were only 3 of them: Situ Beiyan, Long Tianming, and Li Yufeng. However, there were a few troublemakers that had popped up now, and they were worth paying attention to, especially since Gu Bei had just become the first successor of the Gu family. Long Yuan also appeared, and Li Xingyin didn't seem to be willing to give up. All 3 of them were related to Nye Li. Since Situ Beiyan had come to observe Nye Li, it proved that Situ Beiyan wasn't as indifferent as he had appeared. At the very least, he was paying attention to the rising Nye Li. Roughly half an hour later, the battle between Nye Li and Morongyu finally came to an end. The flames and lightning subsided. In the arena, Nye Li had already changed into a new set of clothes. Morongyu, on the other hand, was lying not far away, looking like a dead dog. His body was completely naked and riddled with scars. He'd clearly fainted. The surrounding onlookers were all dumbfounded at this scene. Holy shit, what's going on? Morongyu lost. Morongyu already merged with the Saint Blood Draconic Hawk. How did he get beaten so badly? They looked at Nye Li with a trace of reverence in their eyes. Morongyu was one of the top 200 experts of the East District. He was the #1 genius of the previous term. In the end, he'd actually been beaten so miserably by Nye Li. Didn't that mean that Nye Li was already ranked in the top 200 the moment he entered the East District? They looked at the naked Morongyu lying on the ground. The faces of the girls from the East District turned red as they hurriedly retracted their gazes. Xiao Yu's face couldn't help turning slightly hot as she glanced at Nye Li. Nye Li had definitely done this on purpose. Even the usually cold Long Yuan's face had turned red. If Morongyu were to wake up and find out about the current situation, he'd probably be too ashamed to face anyone. This would definitely be worse than death. Nye Li glanced at Morongyu, who was lying on the ground, and said indifferently, back in the ghastly ruins, "You stole my soul scales. Today, I'll get back at you on the stage. We're even." When the surrounding students of the East District heard this, they had the urge to vomit blood. Stealing soul scales was a common occurrence between students. What Nye Li had stolen was Morongyu's clothes. Nye Li jumped off the stage and walked towards Gu Bei and the others. Gu Bei and Lu Pia winked at Nye Li. This move of Nye Li's was really interesting. At that moment, Huang Yu and Nanmen Tianhai could only smile helplessly. They had to change the rules now. Otherwise, wouldn't all the students of the East District be trampled by Nieli? After all, Nieli was wearing a grade 6 artifact set. While Huang Yu and Nan Men Tianhai were in the middle of their discussion, Venerable Flameless walked to their side and said in a low voice, "Elders, Hierarch Skycloud has asked me to pass a message to you. He wants me to send a few people to test Nieli." Huang Yu and Nan Men Tianhai's hearts trembled at Venerable Flameless' words. Who was Hierarch Skycloud? He was one of the 5 pinnacle existences of the Hagami Munmian. At their level, they didn't even have the qualifications to meet Hierarch Skycloud. Venerable Flameless was Hierarch Skycloud's eldest disciple. His words couldn't be doubted. Furthermore, how could they dare to question Hierarch Skycloud's instructions? Venerable Flameless, don't worry. We'll make the arrangements. Huang Yu hurriedly said. Venerable Flameless responded indifferently, then sat down on a seat to the side. A trace of coldness flashed through his eyes as he swept his gaze towards Nieli, who was chatting with Gu Bei and the others. He sneered. The competition continued. Nan Men Tianhai stood up, and his voice echoed throughout the entire arena. Send Morong Yu down. This time, we'll have to change the rules. No one is allowed to use artifacts of grade 3 or higher. Hearing Nan Men Tianhai's words, all the students of the East District couldn't help but be stunned. There had never been such a rule in previous competitions. Could it be because of Morong Yu's crushing defeat? They recalled the Thunder God's meteorite sword in Nya Li's hands. It seemed like Nieli had relied on that artifact to win against Morong Yu. Now, even Elder Nanmen Tianhai couldn't stand it anymore. That's why artifacts of grade 3 and above were banned. No wonder Nya Li could defeat Morong Yu. Only then did the students of the East District understand. No wonder. In terms of actual strength, Nya Li probably wasn't Morong Yu's match. Hearing this, Nya Li looked towards Nanmen Tianhai and Huang Yu. A familiar figure in the distance caused him to narrow his eyes. He never thought that Venerable Flameless, who he'd clashed with in the Skycloud Shrine, would also be here. I can't even use artifacts anymore. I was still thinking of oppressing those people from the East District, like Nieli. Lu Piao said with a hint of regret. She never thought that artifacts would be banned so soon. How boring. Li Xingyun couldn't help but roll his eyes. If Nya Li, Gu Bei, and Lu Piao were all wearing grade 6 artifact battle armors and oppressing the students of the East District, it'd be strange if Nanmen Tianhai and Huang Yu didn't make a move. Back then, even he had been beaten up the moment he arrived at the East District. That experience was simply unbearable to recall. As for Nya Li and the other two, they weren't here to be beaten up, but to be beaten up. This was simply intolerable. Nanmen Tianhai coughed, then unhurriedly said, "Logically speaking, since Nya Li defeated Morong Yu, he should replace Morong Yu's ranking. However, after some discussion with Elder Huang Yu, we've decided to give Nya Li another test. Only if Nya Li passes the test will he have the qualifications to replace Morong Yu." It seemed that Elder Nanmen Tianhai couldn't stand it anymore and wanted to give Nya Li a difficult test. Who knew what kind of test it would be? All the students of the East District couldn't help but look forward to it. Nya Li had just beaten Morong Yu so miserably, causing them to lose a lot of face. From the looks of it, Nya Li would have to pay the price. Updates have been a little slow lately, but please forgive me. On one hand, I need to adjust my body's condition. On the other hand, I still need to prepare various things for the birth of my baby. I'll be a little busy. After all, this is one of the most important things in life. Chapter 352. Next, we'll choose an opponent to spar with Nya Li and test Nya Li's strength. Nanmen Tianhai said solemnly, "During the competition, you're not allowed to use any artifacts of grade 3 or above." Nya Li frowned when he heard Nanmen Tianhai's words. Lu Piao Gu Bei and the others looked at each other. There's never been such a rule in the past. Could someone be targeting Nieli? Gu Bei raised her guard. Nieli roughly understood what was going on. It was probably Venerable Flameless doing. However, at this moment he couldn't retreat. The moment he retreated, people would think that he only relied on artifacts to win and didn't have any real skills. Although the East District's competition didn't seem important, many of the upper echelons of the Hagami Munyan were probably paying attention to this matter. If Nieli formed a fixed impression in the minds of these upper echelons of the Hagami Munyan, then it would definitely have a detrimental effect on his future bid for the position of Patriarch of the Hagami Munyan. If someone else chose an opponent for him, then Nieli wouldn't have a choice in the upcoming competition. I wonder how many opponents the two elders have prepared for me? Nieli asked Huang Yu and Nanmen Tianhai. If they sent an endless stream of people, then Nieli would be annoyed to death. Nanmen Tianhai seemed to be waiting for someone's reply. After a brief moment, he looked at Nieli and said, "Just 2 opponents." "Understood." Nieli nodded. Since the other party had only sent 2 people, it was clear that they were very confident in their strength. However, the other party had probably underestimated his strength to a certain extent. The students of the East District all focused their attention on Nieli. Who would Elder Nanmen Tianhai send to spar with Nieli? They couldn't help but look forward to it. If Nieli couldn't use his artifact, it would be hard for him to avoid being beaten up, right? All the new students who were promoted from the West Courtyard to the East Courtyard had to be taught a harsh lesson. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in awe. A young man around the age of 20, with a robust figure, leaped onto the arena. It's Yi Chong. His ranking is even higher than Morong Yu's. To send such an expert at once, Nieli is definitely going to suffer. Even Morong Yu isn't his match. Of course, the 2 elders wouldn't send someone with weak strength up. A student from the East Courtyard said mockingly, "If you want to win by relying on treasures, you will have to pay the price." Of course, these East District students couldn't bear to see their East District students being defeated by the newly promoted geniuses from the West District. If that was the case, I'm afraid I won't be able to hide. Nieli put away his artifact and changed his clothes. He leaped onto the stage and faced Yi Chong from afar. "Yi Chong, don't hold back. Kill him. If anything happens, I'll take responsibility." Venerable Flameless transmitted his voice to Yi Chong. He didn't know if Nieli had left his fate soul in the soul hall. If he hadn't, then Nieli was dead for sure. He could borrow Yi Chong's hand to kill Nieli. As for what would happen after that, in Venerable Flameless' eyes, sacrificing Yi Chong wasn't a big deal. Yi Chong's heart trembled when he heard Venerable Flameless' words. He never thought that Venerable Flameless would actually want to kill Nieli. Killing someone in the Sky Soul Institute was a very severe punishment. They might even be locked up in an ice cellar. However, he couldn't disobey Venerable Flameless' words. He looked at Nieli and cupped his hands. "Sorry for the offense." Asterisk bang. Asterisk a powerful aura exploded out from Yi Chong as the center. The aura on his body rose like crazy. Nieli felt a trace of pressure. He looked at Yi Chong and saw a trace of killing intent flash through Yi Chong's eyes. Nieli's heart trembled as he immediately understood. Yi Chong wanted to kill him right here in the arena. He didn't have any enmity with Yi Chong. So why did Yi Chong want to kill him? Killing someone in the Sky Soul Institute, even if it was a mistake in a competition, would still be severely punished. However, Yi Chong had still decided to do so. It seemed that Venerable Flameless had given him a death order. Due to the instability of his fate soul, Nieli still hadn't placed his fate soul in the soul hall. He couldn't help raising his vigilance. Venerable Flameless wouldn't give up until he achieved his goal. Even if Yi Chong lost, Venerable Flameless would still send another person. Nieli's brain quickly spun. How should he deal with this matter? This was the first time his life had been threatened since he'd arrived at the Sky Soul Institute. Sure enough, it was hard to guard against a hidden arrow. As if he didn't want to give Nye Li any time to react, Yi Chang's body was surrounded by boundless heavenly energy. He suddenly took a step forward, and a majestic aura surged towards Nye Li like a tidal wave. He let out a low roar, and icicles grew from his body, turning him into a giant beast. Asterisk rumble! Asterisk the heavenly energy on the stage violently surged, and a bone-piercing chill seemed to be able to freeze space itself. The surrounding airflow instantly froze, making everyone feel as if they'd fallen into a swamp. Countless ice shards glowing with a blue light gathered at a speed visible to the naked eye. They gathered on the forelimbs of the giant beast as a chilling aura slowly spread out. Frost Dragon Beast. Huang Yu and Nan Mentianhai were both shocked at this scene. This Frost Dragon Beast was also an extraordinary level growth, rate, dragon, bloodline demon beast. They couldn't help glancing at Venerable Flameless. If this was just a test, there was no need to send such a powerful person up right from the start. Although Nye Li had defeated Morongyu, Venerable Flameless should be able to tell that Nye Li had only won by relying on a cosmic artifact. The Frost Dragon Beast took a step forward, and waves of ice energy quickly spread across the entire stage. Nye Li felt the heavenly energy within his body freeze, and he felt as if he couldn't even move an inch. It was a suffocating chill. An ominous glint flashed through the Frost Dragon Beast's eyes as it swung its huge paw towards Nye Li. Die! Asterisk boom. 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 Asterisk huge icicles rained down like a torrential rain, carrying with them an indescribably terrifying energy as they ruthlessly swept towards Nye Li. Bang! The ground began to crack, and cracks quickly spread out. The Frost Dragon Beast's giant palm had yet to land, but the ground of the martial stage had already cracked into pieces. Sensing the terrifying energy fluctuations, the spectators standing at the edge of the stage couldn't help but retreat. They couldn't help but inwardly suck in a breath of cold air as expressions of fear appeared on their faces. Yi Chang's strength was too terrifying. This kind of sharp attack seemed to be even stronger than Morongyu's. Could Nye Li, who couldn't use a cosmic artifact, withstand it? Everyone's gazes simultaneously landed on Nye Li. Yi Chang's strength was indeed stronger than Morongyu's. It seemed that Venerable Flameless didn't want to give him any chance. Just as the Frost Dragon Beast's huge fist was about to land on his body, Nye Li suddenly merged with the Shadow Devil demon spirit. With a whoosh, he turned into a streak of light and disappeared. Asterisk boom! Asterisk the Frost Dragon Beast's fist landed, and a terrifying energy swept out. The ground was instantly covered in a thick layer of ice. However, its attack missed. Sensing the Frost Dragon Beast's powerful strength, Nye Li understood that if he didn't retaliate now, the consequences would be dire. He quickly flew behind the Frost Dragon Beast and merged with the Fanged Panda demon spirit. He opened his mouth and spat out 2 balls of light, one black and one white. The black and white balls of light danced in the air as they flew towards the Frost Dragon Beast's butt. Chapter 353. Asterisk boom. Asterisk the black and white balls of light collided and exploded. A powerful force erupted and bombarded the Frost Dragon Beast, almost causing it to be flipped over. Although Nye Li's strength was only at 4 fate, the Yin-Yang Blast was able to multiply his strength by several folds. The Frost Dragon Beast furiously roared and sent icicles towards Nye Li's Fanged Panda. Asterisk whoosh. Asterisk Nye Li turned back into the Shadow Devil demon spirit and quickly disappeared. His switch back and forth was as smooth as flowing water. Although the Frost Dragon Beast's strength far surpassed Nye Li's, it couldn't do anything to Nye Li for the time being. Asterisk boom. Boom. Asterisk the icicles and the Yin-Yang Blast continued to collide, causing terrifying shockwaves to sweep out. Seeing the battle between Nye Li and the Frost Dragon Beast, the students of the East District were all shocked. Before Nye Li fought with Yi Chang, they had absolute doubts about Nye Li's strength. They felt that if they really fought, Nye Li would definitely lose. He probably wouldn't even last 3 moves. However, reality far exceeded their expectations. Although the strength Nya Li displayed wasn't as strong as Yi Chang's, he was still able to calmly deal with Yi Chang's attacks and didn't lose too quickly. That kid actually integrated with 2 demon spirits at the same time. Both Huang Yu and Nan Men Tianhai were a little shocked. They'd never seen anyone that could integrate with 2 demon spirits at the same time. They originally thought that Nya Li had relied on his artifacts to defeat Morongyu, who was at 6 fate. But now they realized that Nya Li had been hiding his strength. He just hadn't displayed it yet. If they hadn't forced Nya Li to put away his artifacts, Nya Li probably wouldn't have been willing to display his strength. The talent that Nya Li had displayed made them very excited. They wondered if Nya Li's physique was special. That's why he could integrate with 2 demon spirits. On the stage, the battle had reached its climax. 2 ice dragons circled around in the sky, twisting towards Nya Li. Wherever the ice dragon went, the air instantly froze. The frost dragon beast brutally performed all kinds of powerful moves, trying to completely lock Nya Li in the space near the arena. Nya Li felt an increasing pressure. After all, the frost dragon was an extraordinary growth, rate, dragon, bloodline demon beast. Furthermore, Yi Chong himself was a 6 fate. Nya Li's yin-yang blast only burned a part of the frost dragon beast's skin. It did not cause much damage to the frost dragon beast. At that moment, Venerable Flameless' gaze was focused on Nya Li on the stage with a gloomy expression. No wonder Hierarch Skycloud valued Nya Li so much. Nya Li's innate talent was indeed very shocking. When he was at Nya Li's age, he had only just stepped into the heavenly fate realm. However, the current Nya Li could already contend against a 6 fate expert. Furthermore, Nya Li had integrated with 2 different demon spirits. The stronger Nya Li's talent was, the more Hierarch Skycloud valued Nya Li. Therefore, he couldn't wait to kill Nya Li. He could feel that Nya Li would take away something that belonged to him. Venerable Flameless angrily transmitted his voice to Yi Chong. Yi Chong, hurry up and kill him. You have 15 minutes to kill him. Otherwise, do as you see fit. Venerable Flameless angrily transmitted his voice to Yi Chong. Yi Chong was depressed in his heart. He'd already integrated with the frost dragon beast. But Nya Li was as slippery as a loach. No matter what moves he used, he couldn't catch Nya Li. Boom, boom, boom. Ice dragons circled in the sky, constantly bombarding. Icicles fell from the sky, but they couldn't catch a trace of Nya Li. Suddenly he had an idea. He roared angrily, and the surrounding ice suddenly formed a huge square chamber. It enveloped the entire martial arts arena. Soon, walls of ice were formed. The instant Nya Li's void form ended, an ice dragon drilled out of the ice walls and flew towards Nya Li. With a huge explosion, the ice dragon landed on the ground and bombarded Nya Li's body, sending Nya Li flying. Nya Li felt a sweetness in his throat as a trace of blood flowed out. Nya Li somersaulted a few times in the air and landed on a block of ice. His heart was heaving up and down. If it wasn't for him protecting his vitals, that attack would have killed him. If the fight continued, he definitely wouldn't be able to defeat Yi Chong, who'd integrated with the frost dragon beast. With just the shadow devil and the fang panda, Nya Li stared at the frost dragon beast in front of him. It looked like he had to bring out his true abilities. The frost dragon beast that Yi Chong had transformed into coldly looked at Nya Li. Although Venerable Flameless had requested for Yi Chong to kill Nya Li, Yi Chong was still conflicted and hesitant. After all, this was the Sky Soul Institute. Killing Nya Li would result in severe punishment. However, he didn't dare to disobey Venerable Flameless' order. If he did, the consequences might be even more severe than killing Nya Li. His parents, his wife, and son were all under Venerable Flameless' control. Go to hell! A blazing killing intent exploded from Yi Chong's body. Countless icicles suddenly grew out from the surrounding ice walls and stabbed towards Nieli. Huang Yu and Nanmen Tianhai were shocked at the sight of this. Not good. They never expected that Yi Chong would actually want to kill Nieli. Yi Chong's profound icicle was a killing move. Nieli was only a 4 fate, not to mention that he was currently injured. It was impossible for him to dodge it. Nieli was a genius that they'd painstakingly unearthed. How could he be killed just like that? However, it was already too late for them to save him. After all, Yi Chong's actions came without any warning. Although Gu Bei, Lu Piao, and the rest knew that Nieli had many trump cards hidden up his sleeves, they couldn't help feeling nervous at the sight of this. That's because Yi Chong's objective was to kill Nieli. Furthermore, Nieli hadn't placed his fate soul in the soul hall. If he died here, it would be too unjust. Their eyes turned red. If Nieli was killed, they'd definitely make someone pay the price, no matter what. The students of the East Courtyard were obviously a little surprised. After all, every time they competed, it was just a spar. Although the newly promoted rookies would be abused miserably, there had never been a situation where someone was killed on the fighting stage. What was going on with Yi Chong? Could it be that he had a deep grudge with Nieli? Just as the sharp icicles were about to pierce through Nieli's body, Nieli let out an enraged roar. His body rapidly merged with the Saint Bloodwing dragon demon spirit. His body suddenly expanded and was covered in pitch-black scales. Boom! 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 The icicles bombarded the Saint Bloodwing dragon scales, causing them to explode and turn into ice shards. Nieli had accurately estimated the power of the profound frost thorns. Although the icicles had caused some damage to Nieli, they weren't enough to pierce through the Saint Bloodwing dragon scales. The Bloodwing Saint Jiao dragon's huge body broke the ice around it. Its pitch-black scales glowed with a faint luster, while the huge wings on its back were filled with a heart-palpitating power. Its bell-like eyes coldly stared at the frost dragon beast in front of it. It was actually the Saint Bloodwing dragon. Furthermore, it was a god-level growth rate. Oh my god! At this moment, Huang Yu, Nanmen Tianhai, and Venerable Flameless were all dumbfounded. Long Tianming, who was far away, suddenly stood up. Chapter 354. The Saint Bloodwing dragon was definitely a king amongst dragon bloodline demon beasts, not to mention one with a god-level growth rate. At first glance, the Saint Bloodwing dragon looked black. However, its true color was dark red, and its entire body was surging with energy. Just this dragon bloodline god-level growth rate demon spirit alone was enough to make Nieli one of the most important geniuses in Hagami Myunmyun's younger generation. The Saint Bloodwing dragon was roughly a third bigger than the frost dragon beast. The boundless energy it emitted made it hard for the frost dragon beast to breathe. Although Nieli was only a 4 fate, a dragon bloodline god level growth rate demon spirit was enough for Nieli to ignore 2 or 3 ranks. Venerable Flameless tightly clenched his fists at the sight of this. So it turned out that Nieli had integrated with a 3rd demon spirit. Furthermore, it was a dragon bloodline god level growth rate demon spirit. It looked like he'd underestimated Nieli all this while. He never imagined that Nieli had concealed his strength so deeply. He finally understood why Hierarch Skycloud valued Nieli so much. Nieli possessed such great potential. Once he matured, he'd probably become the strongest existence in Hagami Myunmyun. 1,000 years ago, when Hagami Myunmyun was on the verge of decline, a genius ancestor rose like a comet, allowing Hagami Myunmyun to become the most dazzling existence amongst the hundreds of sections. Even after the apocalypse, it was still perfectly preserved. In the past 100 years, Hagami Myunmyun had been on the verge of decline. Several big shots of Hagami Myunmyun were looking for a chance to turn things around. They even personally nurtured several geniuses from the Central District. Nieli had only entered Hagami Myunmyun not long ago. but the speed of his rise was extremely shocking. It was easy for people to associate it with him. Hierarch Skycloud would definitely nurture Nieli at all costs. Who knows, he might even pass down the Skycloud cultivation technique to Nieli. Unlike other divine arts, the Tianyin divine art had always been passed down to only one person. Venerable Flameless would be very unconvinced if the Skycloud technique was learned by Nieli. After all, he had followed Hierarch Skycloud for so many years. A trace of ruthlessness flashed across Venerable Flameless' eyes. No matter what, he had to ruthlessly suppress Nieli before he rose to power. At this moment, in Long Tianming's heart, he had the same thoughts. He had done many things to reach his goal step by step, but now Nieli had popped out of nowhere. This sudden change made him feel extremely uneasy. He would not let anyone spoil his plan. Fortunately, Venerable Flameless had sent someone to probe Nieli's strength. Otherwise, he would have been kept in the dark and wouldn't have placed Nieli in his eyes. If he waited for Nieli to threaten him, it would be too late. He had to get rid of Nieli as soon as possible. Fortunately, Venerable Flameless was standing up for him. Otherwise, he would have to personally suppress Nieli. In the past, he'd felt that Situ Beiyan was the greatest threat, but now he realized that Nieli was the greatest threat. Situ Beiyan looked at Nieli with a profound gaze as he muttered to himself. He never expected that this would be the case. Situ Beiyan, I feel that we can put aside the conflict between us. You should have sensed his potential. Once he matures, he will definitely threaten your position as the successor to the patriarch. Long Tianming took a sip of tea as he looked at Situ Beiyan. Situ Beiyan shook his head at Long Tianming's words. Long Tianming, I understand what you mean. However, you've misjudged me. I'm not fighting with you for my own benefit. I'm not fighting for the position of the patriarch. Instead, I want to see who's more suitable for the position of the patriarch. If a new genius rises, I definitely won't suppress him. Who knows, he might become a figure like that ancestor and lead Hagami Munyan to glory. Why should I suppress him? Long Tianming sneered. Situ Beiyan, don't joke around. Are you really that selfless? If Hierarch Skycloud had said that, I would have definitely believed him. But since you said it, but do you think I'll believe you? Situ Beiyan shrugged. It's fine if you don't believe me. In any case, I won't be interfering in this matter. Long Tianming was inwardly annoyed. Situ Beiyan was clearly planning on watching with folded arms. He was probably trying to reap the benefits. However, Long Tianming was also helpless. If he didn't do anything, was he going to let Nieli grow into the greatest threat? At that moment, Nieli, who had fused with the Saint Bloodwing Dragon, approached the Frost Dragon Beast step by step. Asterisk bang, bang, bang. Asterisk wherever he crashed into, the ice walls would rapidly shatter. Yi Chong felt a suffocating pressure as he watched the Saint Bloodwing Dragon approach him step by step. However, he also felt an indescribable relief in his heart. After all, it wasn't that he didn't want to carry out Venerable Flameless orders, but that he didn't have the ability to do so. Yi Chong also understood why Venerable Flameless wanted to deal with Nieli. Fortunately, he didn't have to take the blame for Venerable Flameless. Otherwise, he'd probably spend the rest of his life in prison for the crime of killing a genius of Hagami Munyan's younger generation. However, he still had to make a symbolic last stand. The Frost Dragon Beast roared and waved its forelimbs. Several ice dragons flew towards the Saint Bloodwing Dragon that Nieli had transformed into. Asterisk bang, bang, bang. Asterisk the ice dragons bombarded the Saint Bloodwing Dragon's body, but they continuously shattered. The Saint Bloodwing Dragon's physical body was simply too strong. The Frost Dragon Beast's attacks simply couldn't break through the Saint Bloodwing Dragon's defenses. The Saint Bloodwing Dragon let out a low roar and waved its forelimbs. With a bang, it slammed into the Frost Dragon Beast's chest. The The frost dragon beast suffered a heavy blow and was sent flying towards the barrier at the side of the stage. Asterisk bang. Asterisk the frost dragon beast let out a mournful cry and fell to the ground. It couldn't get up anymore as its body rapidly shriveled and reverted to its human form. Nye Li's attack had seriously injured Yi Chong. A god-level, growth, rate, bloodwing, Saint Jiao dragon was truly too powerful. The surrounding students of the East District revealed deep fear in their eyes. This new student really couldn't be provoked. He'd just entered the East District, yet he'd already defeated Morongyu and Yi Chong. If he continued to grow, how powerful would he be? Nye Li put away the Saint Bloodwing dragon and quickly reverted to his human form. Although he'd managed to crush Yi Chong after merging with the Saint Bloodwing dragon, Nye Li had also suffered severe injuries. His heavenly energy had also been severely overdrawn. He clutched his chest and gasped for breath. Huang Yu stood up and smiled. Nye Li won this match. Since he was able to defeat Yi Chong without using any artifacts, both Elder Nanmen Tianhai and I have acknowledged his strength. After this battle, he's also injured. Let him rest for now. Nanmen Tianhai stood up and said, "That's right. Let Nye Li's test end here." Hearing the two elders' words, the students of the East District didn't have anything else to say. Nye Li's strength had already been displayed for all to see. What else could they say? Wait. A voice suddenly rang out. Venerable Flameless, who was at the side, stood up. Elders, isn't it a little too hasty to end things like this? Chapter 355. Huang Yu and Nanmen Tianhai paused and looked at Venerable Flameless when they heard his words. Huang Yu and Nanmen Tianhai thought that Venerable Flameless was merely testing Nye Li's strength. They never imagined that Yi Chong would actually try to kill Nye Li. This was a little too much. However, Huang Yu and Nanmen Tianhai didn't want to expose this matter. Although they were elders of Hagami Myunmyun, Venerable Flameless was Hierarch Skycloud's disciple after all. His status was much higher than theirs. But no matter what, Huang Yu and Nanmen Tianhai couldn't just watch as Nye Li was killed. Venerable Flameless coldly snorted and said in a clear voice, Yi Chong acted on his own and was too heavy-handed during the battle. Men, take him away and lock him up. Hand him over to Hagami Myunmyun's enforcement hall for punishment. A few people rushed onto the stage like wolves and tigers, detained Yi Chong and took him away. Huang Yu hurriedly tried to stop Venerable Flameless and said, Venerable Flameless, isn't this not too good? Although Yi Chong was too heavy-handed, he didn't injure Nye Li. He could vaguely guess Venerable Flameless' intentions. He wanted to burn the bridge after crossing it. Venerable Flameless methods were indeed ruthless. Yi Chong didn't listen to orders and acted on his own. Fortunately, he didn't injure Nye Li. If he had injured Nye Li, that would be an unforgivable crime. Venerable Flameless coldly snorted. Since things have come to this, let's forget about this test. Nanmen Tianhai said, even if they had to sacrifice Yi Chong, they definitely couldn't sacrifice Nye Li. How can we do that? Venerable Flameless immediately rejected. The two elders already said that they would arrange 2 tests for Nye Li. How can we go back on our words? Gu Bei, Lu Piao, and the rest understood after hearing the conversation between Venerable Flameless, Huang Yu, and Nanmen Tianhai. So Venerable Flameless had set up a trap to harm Nye Li. They still didn't know how Nye Li had offended Venerable Flameless. Venerable Flameless, according to the past rules, new disciples are allowed to choose their own opponents. There has never been an arrangement like today. Even if they could do that, they had arranged an opponent like Yi Chong for Nye Li. Isn't that a little too much? Li Xingyun was the first to step forward and said loudly. Venerable Flameless snorted when he heard Li Xingyun's words and said, Ignorant Junior, I'm talking to Elders Huang Yu and Nanmen Tianhai. What right do you have to interrupt? Venerable Flameless was overbearing. Li Xingyun said indignantly, Venerable Flameless, are you planning to use your power to suppress others? As a student of the East Campus, you have no respect for your elders. How dare you accuse me of bullying you? I wonder how your teacher usually teaches you? Venerable Flameless swept a cold glance at the East District's teachers. The mentors averted their gazes. Venerable Flameless was the disciple of Hierarch Skycloud. How could they dare to say anything? Li Xingyun was furious in his heart. However, he couldn't say anything at this moment. He quickly thought of how he could help Nia Li out of this predicament. At this moment, the East District students all understood. So this was all arranged by Venerable Flameless. All of them were very intelligent, so they could tell that Venerable Flameless was trying to suppress Nia Li. It seemed like Nia Li had offended Venerable Flameless at some point in time. From the way Yi Chong was taken away, they could tell that Venerable Flameless didn't just want to teach Nia Li a lesson. Instead, he wanted to kill Nia Li and make Yi Chong a scapegoat. They couldn't help sighing in their hearts. This move of Venerable Flameless was too ruthless. Fortunately, Nia Li possessed the Saint Bloodwing Dragon Demon Spirit. Otherwise, he'd probably die a wrongful death on the stage. Some of the East District students didn't mind. Since this matter wasn't related to them, they could just let it slide. However, some students were extremely indignant. After all, with Venerable Flameless status, suppressing a newly advanced genius was too inappropriate. However, with Venerable Flameless status, the others couldn't say anything. Even if they did, it probably wouldn't be of much use. Huang Yu and Nanmen Tianhai were a little angry. Venerable Flameless was using his power to suppress others. As elders, they couldn't resolve this. Venerable Flameless said that Yi Chong's attempt to kill Nia Li wasn't because of him, so there was nothing they could do. However, they definitely wouldn't let Nia Li compete again. If they were to compete again, Venerable Flameless would definitely arrange for an opponent that Nia Li couldn't defeat. Nia Li looked at Venerable Flameless, Huang Yu, and Nanmen Tianhai, who were arguing. Venerable Flameless' intentions were very obvious. He was very touched that Huang Yu and Nanmen Tianhai were willing to speak up for him. Nia Li glanced at Venerable Flameless. Now that he displayed the Saint Bloodwing Dragon, Venerable Flameless would probably be even more impatient to get rid of him. However, Venerable Flameless' actions were very obvious. Even if Hierarch Skycloud didn't know about it now, he'd definitely find out in the future. At that time, it would be even harder for Venerable Flameless to obtain Hierarch Skycloud's trust. Nia Li found out everything from Venerable Red Soul. Venerable Flameless' father had once saved Hierarch Skycloud. Hierarch Skycloud might not do anything to Venerable Flameless, but the thing that Venerable Flameless wanted would be getting further and further away from him. As for Hierarch Skycloud's Skycloud cultivation technique, Nia Li wasn't the slightest bit interested. Although the Skycloud cultivation technique was indeed an extremely powerful cultivation technique, it was still far from being comparable to the Heavenly God cultivation technique. Although he knew that more enemies would appear soon, the Saint Bloodwing Dragon had already been exposed. Nia Li could only fight. He couldn't retreat at this moment. He had to slaughter his way into the Central District and become one of the successors to the Patriarch. Only then would he have more room to display his abilities. Therefore, he had to press forward with an indomitable will. The upcoming battle was probably unavoidable. Nia Li quickly swallowed a few medicinal pills, then started to cultivate and recover from his injuries. After this battle, his cultivation seemed to have made some progress. He was slowly forming his fifth fate soul from the 5-fate heavenly fate realm. If he could break through to the 5-fate heavenly fate realm, then he'd have a higher chance of victory. Nia Li frantically circulated the heavenly energy within his body. The myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting above his soul realm circulated endlessly, pouring out heavenly energy endlessly. In just a short moment, Nia Li's soul realm was filled to the brim. Nye Li felt that his injuries had already healed, and his strength had greatly increased. However, breaking through to the heavenly fate realm was still a little too difficult. Venerable Flameless coldly snorted as he glanced at Nye Li, who was currently recuperating. He looked at Huang Yu and Nanmen Tianhai and said, "Nye Li can be considered as my junior brother. As a senior brother, it's only natural for me to want to understand his strength. I've already helped Nye Li choose his opponent. Elders, you don't have to say anything more." Huang Yu furrowed his brows and said, "Isn't Venerable Flameless overstepping his boundaries?" "Is this overstepping my boundaries? It's our Skycloud Hall's own matters. Isn't it up to the two elders to butt in?" Venerable Flameless coldly snorted. Huang Yu and Nanmen Tianhai weren't sure if Hierarch Skycloud was the one who'd arranged to test Nye Li. However, they were certain that Hierarch Skycloud wouldn't make a move against Nye Li. They had to stop Venerable Flameless. Nanmen Tianhai solemnly said, "Venerable Flameless, if you really want to do this, then I think it's best if we ask Hierarch Skycloud first." Venerable Flameless coldly swept a glance at Huang Yu and Nanmen Tianhai. These two stubborn old fellows had truly infuriated him. He solemnly snorted and said, "There's no need for the two elders to interfere in my matters." He glanced at a student of the East District and solemnly said, "Gua Huai, go and test Nye Li's strength. Remember to show mercy." Chapter 356. Although Venerable Flameless had said to be lenient, how could Gua Huai not understand the meaning behind his words? "Yes." Gua Huai respectfully replied as he glanced at Nye Li with a trace of ruthlessness flashing through his eyes. Compared to Yi Chong, Venerable Flameless clearly trusted Gua Huai more. Gua Huai was his trusted subordinate. Even if he wanted Gua Huai to die, Gua Huai wouldn't even frown. Huang Yu and Nanmen Tianhai were shocked by Venerable Flameless' words. Gua Huai had reached 9 fate, even if Nye Li had integrated with a dragon bloodline god-level demon spirit. He was still only a 4 fate. How could he defeat a 9 fate student? What's more, Gua Huai was a subordinate that Venerable Flameless had meticulously nurtured. Compared to ordinary 9 fate students, he was much stronger. Absolutely not. Huang Yu hurriedly said. He couldn't understand why Venerable Flameless would deal with Nye Li in such an unbridled manner. What Huang Yu didn't know was that Venerable Flameless could sense that Nye Li had displayed an astonishing amount of potential. Hierarch Skycloud would soon pay more attention to Nye Li and focus on nurturing Nye Li. Furthermore, the fact that he wanted Yi Chong to kill Nye Li had already been exposed. In for a penny, in for a pound, in for a pound. If he missed this opportunity, he wouldn't have another chance in the future. That's why Venerable Flameless was so overbearing, completely ignoring Huang Yu and Nanmen Tianhai's attempts to dissuade him. Venerable Flameless released a powerful aura from his body, suppressing Huang Yu and Nanmen Tianhai. After all, Venerable Flameless was a Tao of Dragon Realm expert. Although Huang Yu and Nanmen Tianhai were furious at Venerable Flameless' overbearing actions, they couldn't stop him. The difference in strength between them was too great. Hearing the argument between Venerable Flameless, Huang Yu, and Nanmen Tianhai, Nye Li jumped off the stage and put on his grade 6 artifact battle armor. He curled his lips in disdain and said, "I refuse to participate in this competition. I quit." Hearing Nye Li's words, the students of the East Courtyard were stunned for a moment, and a few of them couldn't help but laugh. Indeed, everyone's attention was focused on Venerable Flameless, Huang Yu, and Nanmen Tianhai. They all knew that Huang Yu and Nanmen Tianhai were no match for Venerable Flameless and felt that it was over for Nye Li. However, they never expected Nye Li to say such shameless words. That's right, he knew that he would be sending himself to his death in this competition. Why couldn't Nye Li refuse? This was an unfair competition to begin with. Even if Nye Li refused, who could do anything to Nye Li? Huang Yu and Nanmen Tianhai definitely wouldn't punish Nye Li. Huang Yu said, "Venerable Flameless, since the students below refused to participate in the competition, let's just forget about it." Venerable Flameless' face darkened. Nye Li was much more difficult to deal with than he'd expected. In the first competition, he'd wanted to borrow Yi Chang's hand to toy with Nye Li to death without causing any huge waves. Who could have expected that Nye Li would actually integrate with a god-level growth rate saint Bloodwing Dragon? In the entire Hagami Minyan, how many people could integrate with a dragon bloodline god level growth rate demon spirit? If he'd known, he would have sent Guo Huai for the first round. He'd wanted to send Guo Huai for the second round. But who could have expected that Nye Li would refuse to participate? Nye Li pointed at Guo Huai and said, "I can go up and fight him. But I want to wear an artifact. Why can't I use my own artifact? What kind of lousy rule is that?" At Nye Li's words, the students of the East District looked at each other. They'd already heard from others that Nye Li had a complete set of grade 6 artifacts. If he were to go up and fight with an artifact, then what was the point of fighting? With a full set of grade 6 artifacts, even if he stood there and let Guo Huai hit him, he still wouldn't be able to penetrate it. Even a Heavenly Axis realm expert might not be able to penetrate it, not to mention a Heavenly Fate realm expert. If you don't let me wear an artifact, then I won't play. At worst, I won't enter the East District, and will return to the West District. Nye Li shrugged his shoulders, looking like a dead pig that wasn't afraid of boiling water. At Nye Li's words, Lu Piao, Gu Bei, and the rest couldn't help laughing. That's right. Since Venerable Flameless was clearly using his power to suppress others, then why couldn't Nye Li act shamelessly? Venerable Flameless was furious, but he couldn't do anything to Nye Li. Was he supposed to drag Nye Li onto the stage? Huang Yu and Nanmen Tianhai looked at each other and smiled. This kid, Nye Li, was pretty smart. As long as they sent Venerable Flameless away today, the two of them definitely wouldn't punish Nye Li. After all, Venerable Flameless had gone too far in this matter. In the distance, Situ Beiyan laughed. "I'm starting to like that kid's personality. Long Tianming. Although he doesn't have much power, I'm afraid it won't be easy for you to suppress him." Beside him, Long Tianming looked at Nye Li with a deep gaze and sneered, "That's not necessarily true. That kid only knows how to play some petty tricks. A true expert wouldn't play such petty tricks." "Expert?" Situ Beiyan smiled. "What kind of expert is Nye Li? He's only been in the Sky Soul Institute for a year. He's only at the Heavenly Fate realm. Yet he's able to put you in such a terrible situation. Long Tianming, why do I feel like you might not be able to beat him?" Long Tianming coldly looked at Situ Beiyan, who was rejoicing in Nye Li's misfortune. Indeed, this kid, Nye Li, was a little too unexpected. Venerable Flameless looked at Nye Li with contempt and said, "You're so afraid of a competition between newcomers? Do you think a coward like you has the qualifications to become Hierarch Skycloud's disciple? So what? Hierarch Skycloud is willing to accept me as his disciple. So Venerable Flameless doesn't care. Furthermore, I want to tell Venerable Flameless that I'm only a 4 fate, yet you're arranging a 9 fate opponent for me. Just who's the scoundrel here? You're currently at the Tao of Dragon Realm, right? Why don't I arrange a Martial Ancestor Realm opponent for you? If you can win, then you're pretty capable." Nye Li sneered. Hearing Nye Li's words, the students of the East District couldn't help laughing out loud. Their laughter made Venerable Flameless feel even more embarrassed. As Hierarch Skycloud's disciple, he'd always lived like a prince. Who in his generation wouldn't give him some face? Who dared to speak to him like that? But today he'd been humiliated by Nye Li. "If you want to play, then go play. I'm not going to play with you guys." Nye Li confidently walked towards Gu Bei, Lu Piao, and the rest. "Do you think the East District is a place where you can come and go as you please?" Venerable Flameless narrowed his eyes as an ominous glint flashed through his eyes. He pointed at Nieli and said, "Recently I've investigated and found out that Nieli is a spy from the Yaoshan sect. Although you can deceive Hierarch Skycloud, don't even think of escaping my eyes. I'll drag you out sooner or later." Hearing Venerable Flameless' words, everyone was slightly stunned. Venerable Flameless' words were vicious to the extreme. It was the same as pushing Nieli into the teeth of the storm. The reason why I'm targeting Nieli is because I've discovered that he has ill intentions. I want to thoroughly eliminate this spy. Although my actions were a little extreme, my loyalty to Hagami Munmun can be witnessed by the heavens and earth. Venerable Flameless proudly puffed out his chest as he spoke righteously. Hearing Venerable Flameless' words, Gu Bei, Lu Piao, Li Xingyun, and the rest all revealed expressions of anger. Venerable Flameless was obviously making irresponsible accusations. Chapter 357. Everyone was slightly surprised. They clearly hadn't expected that Venerable Flameless would actually accuse Nieli of being a spy for the Yaoshan sect. Did Venerable Flameless have conclusive evidence, or was he intentionally framing him? Practically all the East District students were observing the development of the situation. Most of them didn't believe it unless Venerable Flameless was able to produce conclusive evidence. Anyone could tell that Venerable Flameless and Nieli didn't have a good relationship, so the possibility of him being framed was obviously higher. Huang Yu and Nanmen Tianhai couldn't help but frown. They already knew what kind of person Venerable Flameless was. It was likely that he flew into a rage out of humiliation after failing to plot against Nieli. Li Xingyun pointed at Venerable Flameless and loudly said, "Actually, Venerable Flameless is the spy." He noticed that Nieli's talent was extraordinary and felt extremely threatened. So he wanted to kill Nieli and get rid of a disaster for the Yaoshan sect. "That's right. I can testify." Lu Piao stood out. "I can testify as well." Gu Bei stood out as well. "Me too." Long Yuan and Xiao Yu stood out as well. The rising and falling voices caused Venerable Flameless to fly into a rage out of humiliation. He pointed at Li Xingyun and the others and shouted, "You're all slandering me. What proof do you have?" Li Xingyun roared with laughter when she heard Venerable Flameless' words and said, "Venerable Flameless said that Nieli is a spy, but what proof do you have?" "I, Li Xingyun, can guarantee on my honor that Nieli is absolutely not a spy." "Me too," Gu Bei said in a deep voice. "Me too," Long Yuan said without hesitation. "You guys." Venerable Flameless was extremely furious in his heart. He didn't expect so many people to stand on Nieli's side. Furthermore, Li Xingyun, Gu Bei, and Long Yuan's identities were a little special. They were all standing on Nieli's side. If Nieli was a spy, didn't that mean that Li Xingyun, Gu Bei, and Long Yuan were all harboring a spy? Venerable Flameless said in a low voice, "The three of you, don't be deceived by his methods." A person from the tiny world without any background was able to make the direct descendants of the three major families speak up for him. Isn't it very strange? Then Venerable Flameless has decided that I'm a spy? In the past few hundred years, have there been any spies from the Yaoshan sect that have infiltrated the Hagami Munmun? Even Hierarch Skycloud trusted me and accepted me as his disciple. However, Venerable Flameless has decided that I'm Hierarch Skycloud's disciple. I wonder what his intentions are by saying that his junior brother is a spy from the Yaoshan sect. Isn't it because he's jealous of me? Nieli pointed at Venerable Flameless as he coldly sneered. Hearing Nieli's words, those that didn't know the truth were 70 to 80% convinced. The possibility of Venerable Flameless competing with Nieli for his favor was higher. Competing? Ha ha ha! Venerable Flameless laughed as he continued. A coward like you, who doesn't even dare to step on the stage, is worthy of it. No matter what you say, I won't be provoked by you. If you have the guts, go challenge a martial ancestor realm expert. If you have the guts, I'll challenge him. Nya Li calmly said as he pointed at Guo Huai. Nya Li didn't know what his chances of winning were if he fought with Guo Huai, but he definitely had a chance of winning. Although Nya Li had merged with the Saint Bloodwing Dragon, he had only used a portion of its power. He hadn't been able to unleash the full power of the Saint Bloodwing Dragon after its mutation. However, there was no need for Nya Li to risk his life. Venerable Flameless was a Tao of Dragon Realm expert, but he actually used such a despicable method to deal with him. Nya Li had to be more careful in the future. He couldn't give Venerable Flameless another chance. At this moment, 5 powerful intents were paying attention to the situation here. They knew everything that was happening here like the back of their hands. The 5 powerful intents were communicating with each other. Skycloud, this Nya Li. You've already accepted him as your disciple? That's right. Hierarch Skycloud's voice drifted over. Hierarch Skycloud's movements are truly fast. It's rare for Hagami Myunmyun to see such an outstanding genius in the past 100 years. The voice sounded distant and somewhat regretful. Could it be that even Lord Patriarch is tempted? You can just focus on teaching your grandson, Situ Bayan. A charming voice said with a smile. Situ Bayan's talent isn't bad. However, with his talent, I reckon that he can barely break through to the martial ancestor realm. It's enough for him to control a region, but it's too difficult for him to become the patriarch of Hagami Myunmyun. The voice sighed. I didn't think that Lord Patriarch would think so highly of Nya Li. Why don't you let Nya Li become Patriarch's disciple instead? Hierarch Skycloud faintly smiled. A gentleman doesn't take away what others love. If there are outstanding geniuses among the younger generation that can stand on their own, they must be nurtured well. As for this Nya Li, we still have to observe him. The voice calmly said, 100 years from now, Hagami Myunmyun will be under the control of the younger generation. Therefore, we naturally have to be cautious when selecting them. Venerable Flameless and Nya Li seem to have some conflict. Hierarch Skycloud, aren't you going to mediate? The charming voice chuckled. This is a meaningless dispute between the younger generation. Let them be. Hierarch Skycloud said indifferently. Aside from the 3 voices, the other 2 auras were also observing Nya Li. A 15-year-old youth had actually integrated with a god-level growth rate, Saint Bloodwing Dragon. Furthermore, with the strength of a 4 fate, he was actually able to suppress a 6 fate genius. It was truly rare. Just as Nya Li was about to turn around and leave, he heard a voice that was like a thin thread entering Nya Li's ears. Nya Li. Hearing that voice, Nya Li's heart trembled. He straightened his body and said, Master Skycloud, do your best to compete with Guo Huai. There's no need to hold back, nor do you need to worry. I'll ensure that your fate soul doesn't dissipate. There are a few lords that want to see your strength and talent. Hierarch Skycloud said. Yes, Nya Li replied. His heart slightly trembled. The lords that Hierarch Skycloud mentioned should be the 5 heavyweights of Hagami Myunmyun. Since Hierarch Skycloud wanted him to make a move, a blazing fighting intent flashed through Nya Li's eyes. Since the 5 heavyweights were watching, then he really had to put on a good performance. After all, if he wanted to become the patriarch of Hagami Myunmyun, then he had to obtain the acknowledgement of the 5 heavyweights. Nya Li didn't know what kind of people the 5 heavyweights were. However, as long as he could obtain the support of any one of them, aside from Hierarch Skycloud, it would definitely be extremely beneficial to his future. The exchange between the 5 heavyweights was completely unknown to the ordinary students of the East District, as well as the instructors, including Venerable Flameless and the 2 elders. Venerable Flameless looked at Nya Li's back and was feeling resentful. However, he saw Nya Li turn around. Nya Li stared at Venerable Flameless and said, I agree to the 2nd round. Furthermore, I won't use any artifacts. Hearing Nya Li's words, everyone was stunned as they stared at Nya Li. Did Nya Li have a screw loose? He didn't agree to it earlier, so why did he agree to it now? A 4 fate against a 9 fate? Furthermore, the other party was obviously trying to kill Nieli. Did Nieli not want his life anymore? That was simply courting death. Chapter 358. Master Nieli, don't be rash. Long Yuan said anxiously with her brows furrowed. The concern on her face was evident in her words. This was the first time she'd ever expressed concern for someone. Xiao Yu glanced at Long Yuan and couldn't help snorting as she turned her head away. Li even said that he wasn't having an affair with Long Yuan. It'd be a miracle if he believed that. He also didn't want Nieli to take the risk. Although he was worried, he didn't say anything. Lu Piao and Gu Bei also spoke up. Nieli, there's no need for you to fight him. You're only a 4 fate, and he's already a 9 fate. I know what I'm doing, Nieli said with a faint smile. Seeing how calm Nieli was, whether it was Lu Piao, Gu Bei, or Li Xingyun, all of them were a little puzzled. Could it be that Nieli was confident? Venerable Flameless narrowed his eyes. Nieli actually dared to agree. Was he being arrogant, or did he have something to rely on? Li's change was too quick, which made Venerable Flameless vaguely feel that something was amiss. Venerable Flameless raised his head and looked at the sky with a pondering expression. Then his expression gradually turned gloomy as he coldly snorted. Guo Huai! Go up and teach him a lesson! Yes, Guo Huai respectfully replied as he jumped onto the stage. Nieli put away his artifact and also jumped onto the stage. Facing a powerful opponent like Guo Huai, Nieli took a deep breath and started to circulate his soul realm. A trace of blazing fighting intent flashed through his eyes. Although he didn't know what his chances of winning were, Nieli would disregard everything and fight. Guo Huai stared coldly at Nieli as his aura surged out. Guo Huai arrogantly looked at Nieli as a powerful aura emanated from his body. I admit that I've underestimated you. You were actually able to defeat Yi Chong with your 4 fate cultivation. But when it comes to me, you'll definitely lose. How would we know if we don't fight? Li's mouth twitched as a stern look flashed across his eyes. Guo Huai raised his eyebrows slightly. He did not expect Li to be in front of him. How could he still be so arrogant? Arrogant confidence. I hope you won't lose so quickly. Guo Huai snorted coldly. Looking at the 2 people on the stage, the students of the East Courtyard stared intently. They knew that Guo Huai was up to no good. Li actually dared to take the initiative to challenge Guo Huai. All of them had strong interest in Nieli. A 4 fate against a 9 fate. Could it be that Nieli had any chance of winning? Long Yuan, Gu Bei, Xiao Yu, and the rest looked at the stage worriedly, worried for Nieli's safety. After all, Nieli was only a 4 fate. Nieli constantly circulated the myriad miles, rivers, and mountains painting in his soul realm. He could feel the vine in his soul realm growing at a crazy pace under the nourishment of the heavenly energy. A powerful aura burst out from Nieli. Humph! Feeling the surging energy from Nieli, a trace of astonishment flashed through Guo Huai's eyes. He coldly snorted, and the heavenly energy gradually condensed into the image of a meter-long heavy sword before him. Buzz! 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 The heavy sword trembled slightly, forming countless sharp wind blades in the surroundings, leaving cracks of varying depths on the profound stone floor of the martial stage beneath his feet. Both of their auras started to rise. An invisible gale surged on the stage, causing the spectating East District students to involuntarily take a few steps back. Everyone's faces turned pale with fright. They never imagined that the 2 of them would be so powerful. I want to see exactly what you're capable of. Guo Huai heavily took a step forward, and his body turned into an afterimage as he swung his heavy sword towards Nieli. Wind blades filled the sky as they shot towards Nieli. Rumble! Under the gazes of everyone on the white cloud battle stage, Guo Huai was like a bloodthirsty beast. He pounced towards Nieli. The extremely condensed gale was like a long waterfall. Wherever the gale passed, cracks that were several inches deep and 7 to 8 meters long appeared on the hard violet stone stage. He hadn't integrated with a demon spirit. He's actually powerful to such an extent. Feeling the terrifying energy rushing towards him, Nye Li quickly merged with the shadow devil demon spirit and disappeared. His sickle-shaped forelimb turned into a cold light as it slashed towards Guo Huai. Boom! 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 The two figures were so fast that even the naked eye couldn't catch their movements. In just a few moments, they had already exchanged over 10 moves. One after another, explosions of air continued to erupt. Although Nye Li could rely on the shadow devil demon spirit's shocking speed to confront Guo Huai, however, Nye Li still felt a strong pressure. In the heavenly fate realm, the difference of one realm is already huge. Not to mention, there's a difference of 5 realms between Nye Li and Guo Huai. It's already not easy for Nye Li to resist to this extent. Die! The heavy sword in Guo Huai's hand slashed towards Nye Li's neck at lightning speed, trying to kill Nye Li with one slash. Void form. Nye Li's body quickly disappeared, causing Guo Huai's attack to miss. Nye Li reappeared. Just as Nye Li's body was about to solidify, the corner of Guo Huai's mouth revealed a strange smile as he sent a kick towards Nye Li's chest. In the previous battle, he saw through the weakness of Nye Li's shadow devil demon spirit. It was the moment when it solidified. Seeing that Guo Huai's kick was about to land on him, Nye Li roared and his body rapidly expanded. At that critical moment, Nye Li chose to merge with the Saint Bloodwing Dragon. Asterisk bang. Asterisk Guo Huai's kick landed on the Bloodwing Saint Jiao Dragon's body and bounced back. The corner of Guo Huai's mouth rose into a smile. Indeed, under his coercion, Nye Li had merged with the Bloodwing Saint Jiao Dragon first. Everything was going according to his expectations. Nye Li's body rapidly expanded to 7 to 8 meters tall. His skin was a strange dark red color, and his huge wings blocked the sunlight. Nye Li raised his forelimbs and attacked Guo Huai. Boom! 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 Nye Li's forelimbs constantly bombarded the ground. Guo Huai was constantly jumping as he judged Nye Li's strength. He was inwardly shocked. A god-level growth rate Saint Bloodwing Dragon was indeed very powerful. The corner of his mouth curved into a cold smile. He had already tested out Nye Li's strength. With Nye Li's strength, it's impossible for him to fight against him. Nye Li was like a raging Tyrannosaurus Rex. He wreaked havoc on the stage like a beehive, filling it with huge holes. Although he seemed to be brainlessly attacking Guo Huai with his strength, he was actually very calm. With his battle experience, how could he not see that Guo Huai was testing his strength? Since Guo Huai wanted to test his strength, he would show it to Guo Huai. While urging the Saint Bloodwing Dragon's strength, he was also sensing the dragon blood in the Saint Bloodwing Dragon's body. Although Nye Li could urge the Saint Bloodwing Dragon to mutate, he didn't have complete control over the Saint Bloodwing Dragon's true strength. Nye Li could sense that the Saint Bloodwing Dragon's body contained boundless potential that had yet to be fully developed. While urging the Saint Bloodwing Dragon, Nye Li could feel his soul realm surging violently. He was only a step away from the 5 Fate realm. As long as he could condense his 5th Fate soul, his strength would greatly increase. Guo Huai even sent his heavenly energy into Nye Li's body. Sensing the Saint Bloodwing Dragon's strength, he now had a clear understanding of Nye Li's strength. A cold smile appeared on Guo Huai's face. You have no chance of winning against me. Now you can die in peace.